packet.
Call to order Hastings Hudson School District Board meeting, October 22nd, 2018. Welcome everyone. Janine, do we have to kick right off?
No, we have to do the public hearing before we actually start the board meeting.
Okay. So we're going to kick off with a public hearing for, how do you say that again?
District-wide
Safety plan, right. Okay. Did you guys have comments on that?
And if there were any comments, we're required to have a hearing. The plan really has not changed, it's just personnel changes. There were a couple of tweaks on sometimes like where we're going to close shelter, but this is a public document. We have internal documents as well that are not shared with the public for safety reasons. But we're required to post this each year in case a member of the public wants to comment about it. And it is on our district website as well, and we also load our, as required, our plans to the New York State for review as well.
Okay. So with that, does anyone have any comments on the district-wide safety plan? Okay. I think we'll vote on that, so we can close the public hearing now. We'll vote on that in the regular meeting. Okay. We'll close the public hearing. We'll open up the public meeting, which I guess is very called to order. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Wilson to give us some updates and announcements.
Thank you. For the superintendent's report tonight, I'd like to congratulate a number of our athletes. We had the conclusion this year of our winter of our fall sports, and many of the teams have just completed the season. Special congrats go to our women's swim team, who had a championship year. Men's and women's soccer teams also made it to state sectional finals, and really did a great job. And now is the time of the year for, I was reminded to announce that the students who are signing up for the the winter sports is the time to do that. We also wish to congratulate our play director, Smacchione, who did a great job in putting together with the students and crew and cast members of the outstanding performance that he gave this past weekend on the Lowry project. And I'd like to point out that the show is one that is very powerful and is in line with district goals of diversity and inclusion. With respect to academic activity, the science, I should say AP Environmental Science program was congratulated on their participation in the River Life of River project, which they do in collaboration with other school districts right here on the Hudson River, monitoring the content of the river and the changes that it goes through. Regarding some of the upcoming events and programs, we of course want to mention that tomorrow night, evening, here at the high school, they will present a program entitled Family Universe, which will, what is it please? University, thank you. And that will be held, and the participants are invited to a light meal in the cafeteria from 6 to 6:30, followed by keynote address, and then a number of workshops that deal with a variety of contemporary issues facing today's students and their parents, how they can be addressed. Parents of all ages are invited along with students 18 years and older. We have a delegation from the high school tonight, and congratulations on this program. But in addition to that, they'll be reporting to us as well on some of their initiatives that the board will be very much interested in. PTA and Hillside will sponsor the book fair starting this Friday through Wednesday. This Wednesday at 7 p.m. there will be a school district needs assessment forum. This is on the lead up to developing a strategic plan that will be open to the entire community starting at 7 p.m. in the high school auditorium. This is one in a series of forums that I will have pleasure of hosting and conducting on behalf of the board to help develop a district strategic plan. I hope many of you will be able to join us either this Wednesday or following between now and December. SEPTA is also sponsoring this carnival program this Saturday, the 27th, from noon to 3 p.m. over at Hillside. So those are some of the upcoming events and what we've been having around the district. I'd like to make some special remarks tonight. I've handed out the school board recognition presentations to each of the board members. And this is the School Board Recognition Week declared by the state on an annual basis. And we have also received a very nice proclamation from Governor Cuomo, which I will hand to the board president. And I'd like to, not to read the whole thing because we've got a busy schedule tonight, but I would read just a few remarks here from the governor, remarking that this is the annual school board's recognition week. We have received this proclamation. He writes, members of boards of education are dedicated to children, learning, and the community they serve. They strive for improvement, excellence, and progress in education, recognizing all children can be successful learners. Communicating the needs of the school district to the public and the public's expectation of the district by working closely together with parents, educational professionals, and the community to create an educational vision we all hold for today's students and their future. The members of these they serve and help ensure the solid foundation of teaching and learning in their school systems. In doing so, they lead students, they help to strengthen their foundations in education, and they lead our state and our system to improve the future prospects of all our students. Let me add this to the governor's statement. I have had a long career personally working for 5 different school districts in a number of communities, and I would say that the Hastings board is as dedicated and as hardworking as any I've seen, and that the district and our schools are fortunate to have this group of dedicated officials. Thank you for all you do and continue to do on behalf of our students. And happy school board recognition.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Wilson. We've put our student report up a little bit earlier in the agenda. This to make sure, in case you've got to get out for any reasons, that you can give us a good report and leave if you need to. Of course, we don't want you to leave. You can stay as long as you're able to. But Elliot, do you have anything to share?
Just as I did before, Emory University is tomorrow, and it seems as though it'd be a really big turnout for that, and the people I've talked to are going to get going. Also, similarly, the Irving project was a huge success. I think everyone I talked to that tried was amazing. And going forward, the auditions for Spray are today, tomorrow, and the next day. And they're getting started on that. And even though it's kind of in the future, I know the Project Share Dinner is in the making, starting now. So that's in a few weeks.
That's great. Thank you. And I just didn't follow the hairspray. Is that across multiple schools that we're having auditions?
Yeah.
That is great. That's great. Thank you, Elliot. I look forward to that. Now we've got Lou and perhaps others, I don't know if it's just Lou, you, to report on a tremendous program they've gone to and are in the middle of called Challenge Success.
It actually is a group of us, and we have an interactive kind of demonstration. But before we get started, I just want to everyone pay attention and make sure they have a folder that I've given everyone. It's just some reading material, not for tonight. For when you go home, you can choose to read all of it. You can choose to read none of it. I would hope that you read some of it. In it, I've purchased you a copy of Denise Pope's first book. Denise Pope is one of the founding members of Challenge Success. If you just Google Denise Pope, you'll see she is one of the most respected research clinicians in the field of stress management when it comes to students. That's one of her first book. I'm about halfway through the book myself, so I couldn't really give you a good synopsis of it. To the left of the folder, some of you have already referenced these. These are what they call their white papers. They go back as far as 2012, and the latest one is in 2018. They cover topics such as cheating, homework, the advanced placement program, and of course the college, whether the college makes a person or whether the person makes a person while they're in college. And those are their white papers. So those are topics that we've talked about a lot as far as the high school is concerned, and I know this community has talked about it a lot. I do want to set the stage by allowing our membership. First, I want to introduce who's with us tonight. And this is the team that had a whirlwind trip to California, basically spent 36 hours in California and took a plane right back. It's Josh Blummer, head of our English department, Greg Stevens, head of our math department, Melissa Shandroff, head of our science department, our school social worker, Christina Repp, and our director of guidance, Jeanette Coker. Basically what we did, we went out to California, to Stanford University, and met with Denise et al. And everyone else at Challenge Success. I believe there were somewhere in the vicinity of 50 schools represented across the country. From Westchester, we were joined by Rye High School and Byram Hills High School and Ardsley High School. But Ardsley High School is 2 years into the program. We are first-year schools, and that's as well as Byram Hills and Rye. And basically what we did there was we met with everyone. We had opportunities to attend varied workshops, which you can find also in your folder. I made copies of our brochure and what workshops we actually attended. We split ourselves up into groups of 2 so we can get the most bang for our buck and then debriefed after. But one of the most important things that we did out there was meet with our coach. We have been assigned a coach who lives in New York, who worked at Stanford for many, many years, has decided to move back east, and is going to be working with us throughout the course of the year. She's actually slated to come meet with us on November 8th as a group. Part of our charge leaving California was to, for lack of a better word, recruit students and parents to join our team so that we are full community when we're looking at some of the things that we need to look at. So we've recruited 3 high school juniors to serve on our committee and 1 parent of a high schooler. We will all be meeting on November 8th as a group for the first time, looking at where we want to go. Part of the process of Challenge Success and what they really do is inform schools based on data, which I'll talk about in a minute, basically giving us the tools to look at our program, look at our school, look at our culture, and try to find efficiencies to reduce student stress, adult stress, that includes teachers and administrators, and the community. And it's all research-based. They don't tell us what to do. They just guide us in certain directions based on what we believe we really need to go. One of our first tasks is going to be develop a vision and a mission about what we really want to do, and that's been a struggle for us at this point. Some of the things that they look at, we do really well already. For example, they asked us whether we are a block schedule school or a 40-minute traditional schedule school. And when we told them we've been a block school for about 10 years, you know, their eyes lit up. Not many schools across the United States are block scheduled schools. And with that inherently comes, and I think you can talk to Elliot on this, homework reduction, stress reduction organically. So those are some, one thing that they talked about. But before I talk more, I need 12 volunteers. We need 12 volunteers. Amy has volunteered 1 slot, so really we need, and of course Amy can't do anything without John. So we need 10 volunteers, and I just need 1 chair. And this is going to be interactive to sort of get you, to give you an idea of why we're doing this. And I don't mind being one of the volunteers, and anyone else just jump on in. Doesn't have to be a parent, anyone, doesn't make a difference.
Where do you need the volunteers?
Up here.
Just come up here.
We will give you a little script. one for Nanisha.
Yeah, gotta earn my stripes for that West Side Story.
Great.
Thank
you.
And the other. So we need to go.
I don't think this is happening.
5:52.
What do you say?
Oh, I say, I'm like, okay.
So will you?
I'm the debate team.
You're just going to, you don't have to say what I say, you just have to go in.
And then approach, he's Andy, right?
He's in.
But then should I text? Yes.
We got all 12?
That's okay, we have, it's okay.
Okay, so Jeanette, Melissa, you want to set the stage?
All right, so today we're going to introduce you to one of our junior students. His name is Andy Bishus, and he is very motivated. He is a great student, and we're going to give you a window into the one day in the life of Andy Bishus. Okay? So, so it's 7:50 a.m., 10 minutes before first period, and in walks Andy's NHS advisor.
Hey, Andy. The director of the convalescent home said she really appreciated you all going down there last week to play games with senior citizens. Nice going. By the way, remember to turn in your service reflection and log your 20 hours of community service by Friday.
All right, now it's 8:45 a.m., 5 minutes before first period ends.
Class, for homework tonight, do problems 1 through 12 on page 224 and problems 21 through 30 on page 227. There will be a short quiz tomorrow based on those kinds of problems, so don't forget to study. If you have any questions, drop by after school and I can help.
You can stand.
I can
All right. It is now 9:43 a.m., 2 minutes before Andy's second period honors English class ends.
Number 3?
The 4.
I've already done this 16 times. Remember, class, you have to finish Great Expectations tonight. We'll discuss it tomorrow, so you'll be ready for the essay due at the end of next week. If you've been sticking to the reading guide, that means you only have to read the last 3 chapters.
Okay. It's 9:52 when Andy's debate team coach approaches, 7 minutes into a 15-minute mid-morning break.
Andy, I'm so glad you decided to join the debate team. I have a feeling that adding your smarts to the team this year just make the difference in us finally beating Redwood for the #1 spot. Hope you're ready for a real challenge and lots of research. Looking forward to practice next week.
Okay, it's 10:02 a.m., 2 minutes after the start of third period AP Spanish.
You did a great job on your recitation last week. Why not? Tomorrow's recitation is even more difficult, so I expect you'll be prepared for it. Si, senor.
Face the camera.
It is 11:42 a.m., 3 minutes before fourth period AP Chemistry ends.
Class, nice work on the lab today. For those who didn't finish the lab, come by after school to get it done. Everyone's lab report is due tomorrow. Remember, it needs to include a detailed summary with conclusions that you discovered from the lab work.
It is 12:05, and Andy's junior class advisor approaches right in the middle of Andy's lunch period.
Hey, Andy. Thanks for working on the junior formal. So listen, 2 reminders. One, the theme needs to be finalized for tomorrow, and you need to let me know what it is. And remember, we need at least 15 volunteers, and you need to help to clean up the dance when it's over at 11 because there's games in the gym on Saturday night.
All right, it is 1:31 p.m., 4 minutes before sixth period AP U.S. History ends.
Remember, scholars, the document-based essay is due tomorrow. No complaints, because I gave you the topic almost a week ago. This essay is the same kind that you'll have on the AP test, so it is a clear thesis and lots of supporting evidence from the primary source material I gave you. It's worth 100 points, so it will definitely impact your semester grade.
All right, it is 2:31 p.m. when Andy's SAT prep tutor approaches, 1 minute after the end of the school day.
Oh, Andy, I'm glad I ran into you here on campus. I'm meeting another student in about 5 minutes for a tutoring session, but I want to remind you to take at least 2 practice tests before we meet on Friday afternoon. You need to make sure to allow enough uninterrupted time for each test. Maybe you should try to go over that last stack of vocabulary flashcards tonight so you'll be ready for the practice test. The real test is just a few weeks away, so it's really important to use every free minute for review.
All right, it is now 2:49 p.m., 11 minutes before the start of a 2.5-hour soccer club practice.
Andy, I'm so glad you're on the club team. You're doing so well, but there are 3 key areas you need to continue to work on. Improving your attack speed, gaining some weight and muscle, and adding a few more offensive moves. If you work hard and improve in these areas, I think you'll have a good shot at making our team for the Junior Olympic Tournament. By the way, since last year, we just fell short of qualifying. We're adding a Saturday afternoon practice in addition to the weekday practices. That should help us get over the hump.
All right, it is now 7:57 p.m., 3 minutes before the youth group meeting begins.
Got that big ski trip next weekend. I sure hope you're planning on coming. It just wouldn't be the same without you.
Okay, so how do you think Andy's feeling right about now?
Great.
Andy, how are you feeling?
Is there any room here left? I don't think so. Okay. Audience, what do you think?
Poor Andy.
I'm glad I have middle grades. That's a tough one.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. This exercise is meant and designed for a very powerful visual on many things in Andy's life and many things that go on in a student's life on a daily basis. As you can see, there was almost no room around to, thank you so much, Andy, no room around to even, Andy couldn't even see in front of him. So this is basically an icebreaker that Melissa and I attended one of the workshops at, and we just walked away going, we have to do this because this is really super strong. It really sends a message as to what students are feeling and who is going to be playing a part in alleviating some of this stress, because it is a community involvement. It is parents, it is the school, it is the student, it's balance, so it's a whole bunch of those things. So we're hoping that we've given you just a little bit of a taste as to what we went through in that 36-hour period of seeing and really, hanging out with other students who are feeling the same thing and getting a lot of input and working with our coach and moving forward and alleviating some of this for our students in the district. So, thank you, participants. Very bravo, bravo. Thank you, Andy, for being such a good sport. And no pun on Columbia.
And while it's intended to be exaggerated, I don't believe it's really that exaggerated. And I also believe that we as adults and parents and teachers and all of us can feel a little bit like Andy felt sometimes. And we sometimes take that for granted. We as a community, and I think we as a world, have decided what success means. And for our school, we're starting to see that in a student's eye, success is what college they go to, how competitive they can be with their peers, and the pressure that parents put on them to get into these colleges. So I think that white paper that Challenge Success wrote about what you do in college is more important than where you go to college. I think it's important. These are the reasons why we're trying to do some of this work. And we needed people who have done the research to really come in and have conversations with us and with our community. We're slated to, part of the design of the program is all of our students will be surveyed by Challenge Success. That survey is happening on October 30th. We've designed a schedule in the day where there's an hour of uninterrupted time for students to engage in this survey. We're also having an assembly the day prior on the 29th, where we will talk to students about what we want them, how we want them engaged in that survey. We want honest information. We don't want them to embellish. We don't want them to hide things they're not satisfied with. We want them to be as honest and truthful as they can possibly be. That information will inform some of the work moving forward. The process after that is we will talk with Challenge Success and some of their leaders about what that data looks like and what it has unpacked. And again, it will inform our work working with our coach. And I've talked to them today. They're looking to do some sort of a presentation to our faculty and to the community sometime in late January or early February, where we'll discuss some of the data that came out of the survey and some of the work that we've been doing up until that point. Anybody else want to jump in about some of the work that we're doing? No?
Well, the board may have questions.
Yep. I was going to open it up next to questions.
I don't have a question. I have some comments. This is fantastic. I love this. Obviously, I haven't had a chance to read, and we haven't had a chance to read it.
Giving you a
but I
lot.
think these white papers are so, and I'm speaking as someone who chairs a college admissions committee. I just think this is really exciting. My only request is that we do the same thing that we did here tonight for parents.
We are. We had planned it already.
I don't need to say any more about that.
Before I forget, Jeremy, before I forget, I do want to thank a few people for allowing us to do this work. I mean, the Ed Foundation was very, very generous in giving us the money to actually join the group. And the district has been so kind in funding all of the travel expenses and all of the other things that we need to do. There actually is another conference in Boston, which is, we're kind of bummed we want to go back to Stanford. But so thank you to the district as well for funding this, because it does get a little pricey, but I think it's good work. Sorry, Jeremy.
How much do you think, I mean, I think it's great too, and I totally see like the stresses coming from all different areas, but how much do you think the over-reliance on technology has affected kids, and how much does that play a role, and is that covered in this at all?
It is. It is part of the survey. They touch on a bunch of different things. One is technology, one is social media, screen time, but they also touch things like cheating, homework, stress that their parents put on them, things like that. I think that is a piece of it. I think we'd be naive to think that any one given factor is what's putting all the stress on our students. But we do see stressed kids. I mean, Christina can attest, I mean, her office, one of the reasons why, you know, the board adopted last year's budget was to put in more time for clinicians to work with kids. And, you know, Christina can attest to that. We're seeing kids who are really stressed by a myriad of factors. You know, I don't want to lay this on the school. I don't want to lay it on the community. There are different things. I mean, Elliot sees it as well. To me, what I see is everyone is judged by what college they can get into. And that's, to me, a sad place. Because I go back to, and again, I don't want to go back 40 years, but, you know, I knew what colleges I was going to apply to. I applied to them, I got in, and I went. It wasn't this competition that I see. And because we're Hastings, there's advantages and disadvantages to being a small community. The advantage is we're a small community. We love one another. We're there for one another. We're a family. The disadvantages of it, everybody knows our business. And that could be hurtful to kids, especially when there are only 2 students applying to a college. We know each other's grades. We know each other's standardized test scores. One kid gets in, one kid doesn't, and wants to know what happened. And we try to make that clear to college admissions counselors. They don't care. And it's so arbitrary today. Kids don't know what to do next in order to get that next little advantage on their transcript and their resume. And that's a sad place for us to be in. And we're starting to see more and more kids transfer after year 1 because they felt that this was the main thing. I needed to get into, again, no disrespect to Columbia. I needed to get into Columbia, but it wasn't a good fit. So I want us to define success differently, and I think that's some of the work that we need to do. You know, pun intended, we want to challenge success, right? So things, I mean, they talked there about low-hanging fruit, right? What do you want to tackle first? We should tackle the low-hanging fruit. Scheduling, that's a low-hanging fruit. Do we want to go from a traditional schedule to a block schedule? AP courses. Do we want to limit the number of AP courses? Right now it's an open enrollment, right? We have students who take 5 courses, sometimes 6 AP courses in their senior year. Do we want to limit that? I can tell you I had a conversation with parents 2 years ago during the PTSA meetings. They were not receptive to that. So it needs to be someone else with the research, and I need the students to tell me how they're feeling so that I can really have that conversation and really be able to talk the data. And then we can make decisions that are really what's right for us. And we may not touch AP courses, but maybe we will. I don't know.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to say thank you, because I think what's really hard about this work is that we have to be reflective first, and that's sometimes the hardest piece. Even with that scenario that we all participated in, it was all very well-intended adults in that child's life. But I think you doing this work and sort of getting the ball rolling, is amazing. So thank you to you and all of the dedicated professionals that we have here. It's amazing. So thank you.
Yeah, and I guess I just want to second that and second the thank you. And I think it just honestly it shows to me how much you collectively as a group that are seeing this forward care about the work that you do. I think there's lots of schools throughout this country where people, they reach a certain point in their career and they're mail it in, and everything I see here is just the level of, care you have for the health and welfare and future of these students is so clearly on display. So, I say thank you for that, and as a board, we'll continue to try to, do whatever you need to do to continue to move this forward. And get the data and the knowledge and the plan for what's ultimately best for the student body forward. And it's exciting because I just honestly, in my head, I see legacy, like the legacy of, your, educational cohort being the ones that really sort of took a look at what are we, how are these kids being impacted longer term. So I'm really, thank you a lot. It really speaks volumes to your collective character, and I think the impact, on these students is going to be really big.
Well, I do appreciate that, but I know I can speak for a district here. We could never just mail it in. We could never just phone it in. We care too much about what we do on a day-to-day basis, and we care too much about our students to do that. And my faculties, and I've said this before in public, I'll put them up against any faculty in the world. That they care so much. We did this activity at the last late start morning, and the conversation, we were there an hour and a half having conversation. And it was honest conversation. And to a person, they want to do this work because they understand and see it in their classrooms, but they also feel it themselves, right? Every day I feel, talk to me at 3 o'clock. I feel like Andy.
Yeah.
So I get it. So we're in it, but I also want to caution everyone, this is not something that's one and done. This is not something we're going to change overnight. This is a process.
Right.
I don't expect to make any kind of recommendations as a committee until really later on in the year. But those recommendations are going to be ongoing and multi-year. And again, we're going to touch the low-hanging fruit first, and then look at the big cultural picture next. So.
Yeah, just say keep us in the loop when you come back.
I will.
The data sounds great when you visit.
I do think, though, if you're going to read anything in here, read the white papers.
Yeah.
I think while you'll look at some of the dates and say 2012 or 2014, they are relevant today as they were back in 2012 and 2014, and the research is really, really good. I also gave you a stat sheet. Some of those stats they come up with, just specific to high school students, will make you really kind of, the hairs on the back of your neck really stick up. And a lot of the stress leads to drugs and alcohol and all the wonderful things we're going to be talking about tomorrow night at Family University. I just wanted to give it one quick last plug, if possible. I'm getting all the credit for Family University. It is not my doing. The coalition in town, Student Assistance Services, Chris Rapp, our school social worker, have all gotten together to do this. I'm happy to report we're close to 200 people registered for tomorrow night, which is unheard of for something here at night that we put on. We usually get the same 30 or 40 parents that show up to everything. So I am thrilled. Some of our teachers did give extra credit for students to show up, but that's okay. Let's get them there. I think that's important. So if you look at some of the topics, and we will not turn anyone away. We did close registration today because we're pretty full, but we won't turn anyone away. But thank you. Thank you for the support. thank you for everything that you do on behalf of the administrators and the teachers. It is School Board Recognition Week, so thank you for all that you do. I know it's a thankless job. I live in Yonkers, where school board members get appointed rather than they are voted on. And I've been asked twice to sit on the school board in Yonkers, and twice I've said no, for obvious reasons. It's just not, it's not my gig. Huh?
You didn't want that extra pay?
No. Yeah, I'll pay. It's just so, thank you. Any other questions?
No, I
Great,
think that's
thank
it. I appreciate
Thank you to everybody.
You know, and as we do a variety of things around curriculum and whatnot, I see this stuff really is going to be a thread that can run through a lot of different planning processes. So, thank you. We look forward to hearing more from you all. Feel free. I know you all.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, bud.
Kelly, please.
Is there a Matthew hobby with a gray Subaru?
Oh, that's me.
Oh, there's they need new.
They need me.
Yes.
I may or may not be that.
Who's out there?
Sorry, I didn't want to
She's coming, she's coming.
Oh, yeah, perfect. Great. Thanks.
Oh, geez.
Okay.
I think we should just add for the public to know, Lou is kidding. School board members really do not get paid. Some people think they do, and that's why I wanted to make sure people understood.
Thank you. We know that well, but maybe I don't. Great, so...
Doug, you want to just excuse Elliot?
Yeah,
sure.
Thank you. See you,
Please, thank you. Right, on the heels of that demonstration, please, Elliot.
You have a lot to do.
So, great, we're going to move on now to the capital bond presentation. And I'll pass it, I think, over to Maureen, to you. And
Yeah, so tonight what we're going to do kind of a focus again to go back over some of what we've already discussed what's in the base bid, and we're going to also highlight, obviously we're going to speak more in depth about website tonight and speak about some of the current space issues. Amy is also here with John, who will speak about some of their vision for the what could be happening if this addition should come. And Joe's also going to highlight some of the work within the scope and just kind of give some pictures also to share with you. So, so I guess Veronica and Megan from H2M will start the presentation tonight, kind of going back over some of the scope of work, and then how to get into the hillside conversation.
Thanks, everybody. So, as Maureen mentioned, we're going to do an overview of the proposed bond scope this evening, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask. So just a reminder that the basic scope of work was identified back in 2015 as part of the Building Conditions Survey, and the Building Conditions Survey is something that every district is required to complete every 5 years. So in 2020, again, the district will be required to complete a Building Conditions Survey, and each of the buildings in the district were inspected, and then a report was provided to the district. Now, over the last 2.5, 3 years, Joe and his staff have worked really hard at completing some of the items that were documented at that point. So there's actually less items on the list now than there were back in 2015. And the final scope of work that is contained within, or I should say the scope, not the final scope, the scope as it is today, is really was just based on meetings with staff in the district in order to develop the entire scope. And about 90% of the projects are estimated for reimbursement for state aid, and really what the next step is with that is that we are making a preliminary submission to the State Education Department based on the scope of work as it is right now, in order to determine specifically what will receive aid and what will not, and then you'll have a very detailed number on that.
That goes back to when we spoke about a month ago, when that there was some concern about some of the work, but that was one person at the state we spoke to, and sometimes we've been speaking to other people because there was some question. I think I spoke about the additional space at Hillside and whether the state would fully fund that, but we do feel, based upon the other conversations we had and the submissions we've been working on, that it will in fact be able.
Yep. So this is just a general overview of the base work items at the middle school, high school building. So the first item, exterior wall and chimney repair. So there's just various areas around the exterior of the building, the brick where it's either cracked, the joints are deteriorated or loose, and it's important to keep the building watertight so you continue to, this is an ongoing item. Some of this work was contained in the 2014 bond, and then this is additional work, as well as rebuilding the chimney. So about $507,000 for that work. There's some roof replacements and parapet repairs that will be required, and that's $1.6 million. Resilient tile and sheet flooring, so it's vinyl asbestos tile, VAT. So we've budgeted $200,000 for the replacement of floor tile within the building. Doors and hardware, and again, I always use this room as an example. The doors over on the right are the doors that don't have handicap accessible door hardware on it, but the doors on the left do, and that would be part of what that $200,000 would be budgeted for, is to provide handicap accessible door hardware, as well as some other doors that either aren't functioning or contain wire glass, which is again the glass in that door, not the glass in that door, which is no longer permitted by code. There are several elevators in the building. This is $400,000 for the next item, is really just to replace the elevator that's in the worst condition at this point, which is the loading dock elevator. There's $450,000 budgeted to renovate some toilet rooms that are not handicap accessible at this time. The next item is $650,000 for the communication system. So back in 2015, when our engineers inspected the building, based on some conversations they had with staff within the buildings, it was reported that the PA system was not working properly in the building. However, since then, we've talked with staff, talked with Joe, and it's been noted that the system is working well. However, there are things that don't. The system works well, but there's the middle school and the high school PA system don't necessarily talk to each other, and there's no capabilities of a lockdown through the PA system. So although we have $650,000 budgeted, which is a complete replacement of the PA system and the clocks, there's actually a more economical solution at this point. We're just doing some repairs and providing some additional equipment in order to make the things I talked about work. So that number could come down, but for now, as my understanding is, we just wanted to budget for the $650 and then potentially reduce it at a later date.
Can you explain what you mean by there's no way to get a lockdown through the PA?
Yeah, the two systems don't talk to each other right now through the middle school and the high school, and then there's no way to provide the like an automated lockdown through the PA system. That makes sense. We use the phones right now.
Two separate systems.
Right.
Another issue with it is that both of them are proprietary systems.
Yeah.
Neither of them are
With outdated, yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
in order, if
So how are we calling the lockdowns?
so we're calling them through the phones right
Yeah.
now. And then
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's what we're doing. But again, the phones aren't in all the rooms, and then they don't
Yeah.
work over into the bathroom. So there is a need. Like we've been adding speakers also. So it's a combination of it being a dated system that we can no longer replace. So we either have to change the front end, but we're also checking the wiring throughout the building to make sure that everything is also.
Right now, it does function, but the integration between classroom speakers and phones, they don't work everywhere.
So when we're having a drill, are we possibly having people who aren't hearing the fact that it's a lockdown drill?
The drills, we're picking up on that.
Wow,
and,
okay.
This is notified. So then we're trying to correct them at that point.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you, Joe.
The whole integration of having all the buildings communicate together. With
So the next item is the boilers in the building that were installed in 1988. So currently they are functioning well, and the 2014 bond, the burners were replaced. So again, Joe's doing a great job on maintaining the boilers. However, because they are 25 years old, we as the professional engineers can't recommend anything other than budgeting for a replacement of the boilers. And again, we just wouldn't want you to be in a situation where you had to replace them in an emergency situation, so we budgeted $800,000 for that. The music suite renovation, this is a gut renovation of the existing music suite, $550,000 for that. And so the total of these base bid items at the middle school, high school is $7,994,000. And I just wanted to note that the numbers along the left, the smaller numbers with the little asterisk after them, those are just the hard construction cost. But the number at the bottom, the $7,994,000, that is actually the soft costs added into it and contingencies. So it's architect and engineer's fees, potentially construction manager fees, contingencies, and escalation.
But hard costs is labor.
Hard cost is labor and material. Bonds bonds, insurance, overhead, and profit for the contractor. So it's the actual contract that you would have with the contractor.
So why is there no hard cost associated with the music suite renovation?
No, there's hard costs.
And so.
No, there is. There's each one of those line items. Oh, my apologies. It's just a typo. There should be an asterisk there as well. Yes. So I wanted to point out those are just the hard construction costs, but the total project cost of this building would be $7,094,000. Yep.
I seem to remember there was one without that 550. I'm not doing the math fast enough here, but that.
Well, some data, because the bottom number also has the other percentages added on top of it.
Yeah, and we have a detailed spreadsheet that lists all these numbers as well. So we can hand that out now. We can hand it out at the end of the presentation. So these are just some examples of some of the issues that are within the existing building, whether it be the repointing and masonry repairs over on the left-hand side, or the cornice the wood cornice around the perimeter of the building that's deteriorating, the non-handicap accessible hardware, the roof on the bottom left-hand corner, the photograph of the roof with the ballast on it, as well as potentially the clock and PA system. Now, at Hillside Elementary, there's also an additional, base bid items that we would suggest including. And again, there's about $75,000 budgeted for masonry repairs around the perimeter of the building, about $151,000 to replace the sidewalks that are in poor condition and a tripping hazard, and ultimately potentially an insurance issue for the district. About $900,000 for the replacement of the remainder of the roofs that were not replaced during the 2014 bond, the replacement of windows in the building, $640,000. Again, some replacement of vinyl asbestos tile. That's mostly the brown tile that's at the one end of the building. The electrical service, about $150,000 for electrical service. And again, there was some electrical panel boards that were not replaced as a result of the 2014 bond that were value engineered out. So we're budgeting for the remainder of those panels. And again, essentially the same exact issues with the PA system at Hillside are the same as the middle school, high school. And then there's a few more items on the next slide. So the exhaust units, the ventilation in the gym is not working properly, so we're budgeting $300,000 for that. Additional parking is needed at Hillside, and there's $317,000 budgeted for that. And also with the layout that we've developed, I think it makes it probably for better circulation within the existing parking lot. So the total of the base bid options for Hillside is about $3.8 million. And again, just some photographs of the deteriorated roof with the stone ballast on it, the windows that need to be replaced, and then the VAT flooring as well at Hillside. So just in terms of the total work items, the base bid work items, it's about $10.9 million for these items that we would absolutely recommend that the district should consider in terms of just keeping the existing buildings operating, functioning properly. So then there's additional items that have been discussed over the last few months or contemplated over the last few months, and we have some drawings as well that go along with these. But the first item is to renovate the boys and girls locker room, and I know Joe and his team has done some renovations to those spaces, and essentially this $2.8 or $2.7 million would complete the renovation of the girls' locker room and the boys' locker room. They're both in poor condition, and the boys' locker room is much larger than the girls' locker room, so we'd make them more equal in size. The middle school auditorium, about $2.7 million budgeted for the renovation of that, and we have some ideas in terms of making that a maker space. So it's $2.7 million. And then as a result of potentially the middle school auditorium becoming that maker space and that tech space, the technology room and the science labs, those two rooms, 124 and 261, could potentially then be renovated and made into some other space if that moves up to.
But again, these numbers, it's just like room space. It doesn't, they don't have to be committed to any particular type of space.
That's correct. Yeah. So we're budget.
It's just really a square footage number.
Yep.
We haven't made any decisions about.
Absolutely.
The middle school and high school will come in another month or so to discuss this.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a square foot number, just what interior renovations cost at this point. And for the middle school auditorium, since we know that there's asbestos containing plaster, we're budgeting for that as well, in that $2,669,000. So the total cost of these items, $6,077,164. So we have some images that you've seen before, but on the top would be the top blue area is the girls' locker room. So there's on the top are the team spaces for opposing teams. So there's a boys and a girls team space as well as bathrooms. And then on the bottom would be a girls and boys locker room as well as toilet facilities in there as well. So now they're much more equal spaces as opposed to what you have now, which right now essentially the girls are at the top of the corridor and the boys are on the bottom of the corridor. So this is some ideas for the middle school auditorium and potentially what could be up there. So what's kind of interesting about that space, I mean, you have this very tall space, and the back of the auditorium, there's the floor elevation is here, and at the front of the auditorium, not including the stage, it's about 4 or 5 feet lower. So you have the framing below that entire floor is sloped as well. So ultimately, in order to get this thing to work, in order to get this renovation to work, we would actually have to level the entire floor. So we would be building up essentially what's on the left-hand side of that screen to be level with what's on the right-hand side. So when you were to come up the stairs where the elevator is on the left, and I don't know, Megan, does the mouse work or? No, okay. That's right, but yeah. So right where the existing elevator is, yep, right up there. So that elevator would bring you up to that space. And remember, we have to make everything handicap accessible. So you'd have stairs that go from that low level up into this main space, whatever how you envision it, and then a wheelchair lift as well for handicap accessibility. And I'm noting that there where it says ADA lift. And again, once you get up to that upper level or that main level, it really can be broken down into, it could be just 3 or 4 traditional classrooms if that's what the district would desire, or it could be a more open maker space. So what we're showing here is just some ideas of what it potentially could be, with a TV production studio and then the media studio next to it, potentially a technology or robotics studio in the center.
Really the cost again is reflected.
It's all.
Some ideas that
Yep.
at one point, like, we just looked at different layouts.
Sure.
Just to kind of get a sense of it.
Absolutely. And then the actual maker space on the right, where you have the different kinds of shop equipment and some images all the way over on the right-hand side for the different types of spaces, whether the maker space or the robotics lab and things of that nature. And again, because you have such a tall space in there, you have an opportunity to build a second level or to have a mezzanine with additional space in it. So, and there are some code requirements as to how big a mezzanine can be. So we're proposing, that's why it doesn't go over the entire floor, it only goes over a part of the floor. But again, that could be additional collaboration studios and storage as well that would overlook to down below. And again, some images on the right of some interactive walls and other spaces like that.
That was a recommendation based upon the
Eva's. Yep.
committee last year. One of the members who's a local resident and architect who specializes in design had made a recommendation to, if we were going to do the space, she believes we should add the mezzanine, which we think is a good idea, but really doesn't take up additional space because of the height.
Yep. Where kids or whoever come together and work together, as opposed to individual desks or And what we're seeing in a lot of different schools now is the furniture is really flexible, and so you have the opportunity to pull the desks apart or push them together to make the different size workstations, depending on how big of a group may be working together. So that's what we're showing there. But
How big is the mezzanine space?
it's probably about how many. Well, right now we're showing like potentially a full class up there, just in that middle space. So potentially you could have a full class there and multiple classes down below.
A little less than 2,000 square feet for the
Yeah.
whole room. That's with the collaboration space and the 2 storage.
Yeah. Yeah. And we know you're always, you're lacking in storage in the building, so we want to give you storage, right? So, all right. So then, so the option 2, the total cost. So it's the 2 numbers that you saw before, everything for the middle school, high school, option 1, the $7 million, as well as Hillside, the $3.8 million, as well as the additional items that we just talked about for $6 million. So it's a total of $16,976,000. So then when we get to Hillside, and I don't know if Amy or Joe, if you want to join me at some point in terms of talking about that, but I can go through what these plans are. But essentially what we've looked at are a building addition to Hillside to accommodate some of the space issues that they're having now, as well as provide a dedicated cafeteria space and kitchen space. So The areas that are that pinkish color, I'm going to turn over to Megan because she's the one who did the inspection there, just to talk a little bit about what those spaces are noting.
So when we walk through the space, the school is starting to run out of resource rooms or rooms to help.
Can you speak in the mic so people on TV can hear?
So when we walk through the spaces with, oh, sorry. Want a chair? Sorry. When we walk through the spaces with Amy, we did notice that there are some spaces that they created into additional spaces due to the demand of what the curriculum needed, as well as for resource rooms and extracurricular activities that they did require. And in doing so, some classrooms needed to be broken up into other rooms. By doing that, we started to notice some areas that SED might question based on their views to the outside as well as ventilation, but it's all subject to what the SED plan examiner views the space as. So in some areas the square footage might be okay, and as well as lighting because they're on the exterior of the building, but in other spaces, by adding the addition, we can reclaim some of these spaces and bring them up to the code or SED standard.
And this is something that's it is subjective by SED. So, what the SED code says is that when we talk about minimum room size, it's required for new buildings and additions and recommended for new spaces within existing buildings. So you have some flexibility there, and it really does depend on the plans examiner that you end up with when the documents are actually submitted as to how strict they're going to be. And that's part of the reason why we do this preliminary submission in order to get the additional information. But these spaces were identified during our preliminary review that potentially could be a code issue, or an SED code issue.
So some of our current spaces are code issues, so as we're submitting the documents to the state in order to ensure that to demonstrate that we have some space issues where we've identified spaces that we already know are either short of square footage.
Yes, so the spaces in the red are the areas that have been broken, that one classroom has been broken up into additional classroom spaces. So these are the areas that SED could comment on when they review the plans. By adding in the addition, we can rearrange the program and the classrooms to fit SED's requirements if the plan examiner sees them as non-adequate spaces. But it's all subject to what the plan examiner sees. So the darker blue area is where the cafeteria and 2 classroom addition would be on the first floor, as well as that light blue area is where the kitchen would be. By doing so, we would reclaim the space where the cafeteria is currently located, which would then serve to become a larger library area. It's the space where it has the clear, and so then the green area we could reclaim to become more to become music classrooms, as well as breaking it up into some practice areas so that way students could be pulled out for their lessons. And then by doing so, we would be able to reclaim the 2 music rooms on the bottom so they could become STEAM classrooms, as well as work with Amy and Joe in the district to gain back the additional spaces that are needed in order to meet any requirements that SED might question or come up with comments.
And just one thing I want to point out with this plan is that we've talked about whether or not a stage would be needed potentially in that building addition, or just utilizing the existing stage. But there's an opportunity. One of the things that Amy pointed out is that the existing stage actually really doesn't function very well because of how low it is and the fact that the floor is not sloped. So we had talked about potentially leaving that stage in on the building addition. And then there's also an opportunity, if it's not going to be a stage within that existing multipurpose room or gym space, that space also could be reclaimed and used as some other space, whether it be some sort of a special education space. Yep. Sure, so there'd be, oh, you want to go on, Megan?
So if you look in the corner of the addition, the darker blue area where there's those two classrooms, if you see there's that rectangular area in between the two classrooms, right in the middle, that's where the bathrooms are located because they're... Where my finger is, that would be the bathrooms for each individual classroom because SED requires that if they're preschool and I believe kindergarten, they need to have bathrooms within this.
Yep. And then we would also, there'd be some space potentially within the cafeteria where there could be bathrooms there as well. Yeah, at this point, again, what we have budgeted for is enough in terms of the budget to build the bathrooms in.
So then when we moved to the downstairs area, the basement floor, there was one room that has a possibility of being questioned because it is a music practice room as well as a conference room, and there are no windows in this one space. So hopefully when we add the addition, we can move this space back up to the first floor. That way there are windows and ventilation within this space.
And as a conference space, it's okay because assuming it's that conference space for adults, SED is really commenting on the space that students occupy.
So then this just shows where the two extra classrooms would be placed on the basement level, and then the dashed outline is just the addition that's above. And then the second floor, nothing has changed to that plan. So the next slide is just some proposed ideas for what this space could look like. This one is a more modern approach. So I'll show you. I'm just going to go back 2 slides for a second. So this elevation that I'm showing you is the wall right here, and then the second elevation that I'm going to show you is the wall over here. So this first one is a curtain wall, so that way the students get natural light into the space because it is a south-facing wall. They'll get a lot of sunlight during the daytime, and then the panels that are wooden that are going vertical, what they'll provide is some shade as well, so that way it's not a heat box at the same time.
And I think with a nice component of the potential wood is that it makes that connection back to the really nice campus that you have there with the trees and the wood surrounding it. So you have that feeling of the trees coming into the space. So.
And then this next elevation would be a more solid facade on this side with some punch-out holes for the windows because this is the wall that is when the cars are driving up, so it's a more secure side. And then this second option is a more traditional approach which fits, which matches what the existing building looks like now. So the window elevations are at the same height as the window elevations that are currently on the campus. And then this is just the other side, so when people pull into the campus, they could see like a precast sign calling out that it's hillside, and the windows and everything line up with the addition that's currently there.
And one of the things I just want to point out over on the left, although it's kind of hard to tell from this drawing, that we propose some outdoor space there as well, whether it, student space, some sort of like an outdoor deck. I mean, you have this beautiful area and you have it overlooking the woods, so we want to take advantage of that also. And it may also be a good, drop-off point or a pickup point for, whatever after-school function or something like that. So option 3. So we looked at the first 3 line items are all the items that we've looked at before that total a little over $16 million. And then when we add the building addition at Hillside, it totals $9 million. So right now, if all included, all of the work items that have been contemplated to date is at $25,986,234. And that includes the hard costs, which is the contractor's costs, as well as the soft costs, which is architect and engineer's fees, construction manager fees for some of the projects, as well as escalation, because you're a few years out from any construction project, as well as contingencies that would be recommended at this point in the project. And then the last slide that we have to go over tonight is just the schedule. So you've seen this before, and there's been no changes to it. At this point, we're really at that September, October timeframe where we're presenting the scope. You're contemplating what that potential scope could be. We're moving forward with the secret determination based on secret review based on the entire proposed scope at this point. And at some point, if you decide to move forward with a bond, you'll be working with bond counsel in order to provide all the necessary resolutions. Really, if you're still looking at a date of like February 15th or February or March for a bond, then you should consider about January 1st being that cutoff date where you need to make a final decision on what the scope should include, because the secret determination needs to be adopted by the board 45 days before a potential bond vote. So you just work backwards from the actual bond vote, and that's how you get that 45-day period. And then the next slide, Megan. So once the bond passes, we can start preparing construction documents, and it'll take about 6 to 9 months to prepare the construction documents depending on the final scope of work. And we would look to submit the projects to SCD at the end of November 2019. Right now, because of what is going on with SCD and they're short-staffed, there's a very long lead time for the review of any project. So generally it's taking about 40 weeks to get a building permit. And honestly, what we're seeing is probably closer to a year through their traditional review process for a multidiscipline project, which is what this would be. What we would potentially suggest is doing a third-party review at SED. There's an additional cost associated with it, but it does cut the review time from about 40 weeks down to 2 to 3 months. And the advantage of that is, although there's a cost associated with it, you have the opportunity of bidding these projects a year earlier, having the construction start a year earlier and construction finish a year earlier. So we would anticipate with a third-party review that you'd be starting construction in the spring of 2020.
Do you think that we'd be better off going right into Amy's presentation before we go off the question?
I think it's probably better to go into,
So I can get started while they're pulling that up. One of the pieces that I was asked to discuss tonight is really a vision for the work at Hillside and what it would look like and what the benefit would be for student learning. So when we think about the ideas that we have for the bond, one of the pieces that we would be talking about is really creating a music suite where we would have space for music classrooms and then also some practice rooms. And that's something that we felt would be a real benefit to our program. Music is something that is highly valued here in Hastings. We know that it has much research on the benefits to kids. And in the packet that I provided to you, does everybody have a copy of the packet?
Yes.
Great. So in there is just some of the research on the benefits of music for kids. Some of the important benefits include the ability that students, it really improves their schoolwork, it increases their coordination, gives them a sense of achievement, gives student the opportunity to excel in an area that's quite different. It's one of our multiple intelligences, so we really would love to be able to support our music program, and right now our music program is a bit fragmented. We have 2 music classrooms that are in our intermediate wing. We have our band teacher giving lessons in our cafeteria, and we have our string teacher giving classes in that downstairs room that doesn't have the windows. So right now they're a bit spread out. That would be something that we feel would be a nice benefit to have at Hillside. The other piece is that in our community, there are some very special programs in music that are unique, I believe, to Hastings. For example, we offer third grade strings, so that's a very unique offering. We also offer kids the opportunity to learn guitar during their free time, which is something that doesn't happen in many elementary schools. So we are already invested in opportunities for music at Hillside, and having a music suite would further allow the collaboration of our teachers, the sharing of instruments, the sharing of resources. So that would be a real advantage to the school. The second area that we are talking about is the library, which really would become a learning commons. And this is very exciting for us because this is really a significant change in the structure of the school right now. So our thinking is that our current library would turn into the music suite, and then we would move our library over to where the cafe currently is, which is a larger space. And we have a lot of ideas in regard to what that learning commons could really be. So I'd like to kind of walk you through just some of the ideas that we have, and then afterward I'll share some pictures with you, just so you can get an idea of some possibilities. So the first thing that I want to share with you is the idea that this learning commons would really be a multifunctional space, and it would be a space for our community. So it would be for our students, for our staff, and then also for our community groups. So what does that mean? It really gives us the opportunity to expand what's always existed. So for our students, the library has always been one class at a time. A learning commons would give us the ability to have more than one class in that space at one time. And I'll speak a little bit more about that and what it would look like as we go through. In addition, when it comes to staff meetings, our staff meetings take place in our library because it's the best place with a smartboard. It's all right there, it's all set up, but it's standing room only for our faculty. So teachers have tables that they can sit at, but many teachers have to lean on bookshelves, and it's not an ideal space for faculty learning. And in the same way, our PTSA meetings that take place in our library are also, it's not really set up to be able to accommodate a large number of people. So a learning commons would give us the ability to improve capacity for all of these different groups. The other benefit of having a learning commons in that cafe space is that it really is centrally located and it has multiple access points. So students could access that space through 3 different locations, and that would give us the ability to not disturb learners as they were at work by coming in through other entrances and being able to leave that way as well. We imagine that there would be multiple areas in the learning commons, and this is really exciting for us, the idea that it's not just a typical library. And as we look at the way that libraries are being designed, we recognize the fact that we could really recreate the possibilities that we have at Hillside. So in thinking about the different areas in the learning commons, one area that we would like to propose is a makerspace area. We had the makerspace, and now the makerspace and the STEAM classroom are kind of combined, but to be able to really put that makerspace right within the learning commons would be a wonderful opportunity. In that space, we would see storage for many of the different tools that students use. We would see a Lego board. We would see multiple tables that would move in different directions, multiple shapes. We would have a glass board so that students could really show their thinking in a very visible, visual way. We'd have chairs on wheels as well, so the tables and chairs could be reconfigured. Lots of bright lighting, and even a vertical charging station so that when we have Chromebooks in the library, it's not taking up space on a cart. We also imagine another space, which is the whole group learning space. And that space is much like what we currently have, where you would have a smart board, projector and screen. You would have student tables that could go together or be separated out. And you'd have bookshelves on wheels. One of the things about our current library is that it's very stationary. Everything stays right where it is. But the idea of having bookshelves on wheels, I liken it to my gym, which is one of the kid gyms where it has all the same equipment each week, but it's set up differently every single time. And that would be one of the beautiful things about having a learning commons where furniture and bookshelves move. You could really set it up based on the kind of learning that you're imagining for students for that day. We also imagine a collaboration space, and the collaboration space would be ideal for group projects. So this is an area where we might have couches, we might have cubes, we might have stools and higher tables. And one of the neat things that we might have are plexiglass walls, so kids could write on the walls, but they're mobile. So they'd be able to move them from space to space. And then, of course, I'm going to show you everything, but I wanted to just kind of give you the overview first before I show you the pictures, because there's not one specific order. And then finally, the last piece is really the reading space. Where do we give our kids that space to be able to have some quiet time to read or read with a partner? So really thinking about some reading nooks, some comfortable seating, varied shelf space for kids to be able to access books, and book display areas as well. So now I'll show you some of the possibilities. Many of the pictures that you'll see up here are just ideas that can really help us to dream of what a learning commons could look like. This is an area that would be for makerspace. So tables with chairs on wheels, you could see it could all be moved about. The tables could be connected or not connected. There's a whiteboard there, or we could do a glass, plexiglass wall, a glass board for students to write on. These are the reading nooks. They're built right into the wall, and they're great spots for kids to kind of hang out and read. And when we think about the idea of having multiple classes in the library at once, you could imagine that there could be a group of kids that are in the library just to do their independent reading time, just to give them another space to come and have that opportunity to read. Here's an example of a library where you can see the stacks are along the walls. You can see many tables for workspace. On the right side, you see bookshelves. All of those bookshelves are on wheels, so they can be reconfigured. This picture we liked because of the couch set up there. You can imagine having small group collaboration. You also see those stools that are cylinder shaped, where the kids could really create their own nooks for conversation and collaboration. Here's another example of interesting bookshelves. You see that they're on wheels again. They have book display space. They're not so high up, so kids can easily reach them. You even see the ones that are down below on the floor, where the books are low enough on the floor that kids could kind of get down and reach them, but also sit on top of them, on top of those benches. Another space you see in the walls there, those circles, are reading nooks for kids. You also notice that those bench tables have books stored inside them. So those books are really accessible for kids to just be sitting right next to pull out some extra books. This was a neat setup that we found online. Those are the plexiglass walls that are in between. So you can see how those are mobile. You can notice how there are different spaces for collaboration, and they're separated by those plexiglass walls so that kids have the privacy to be able to work with a small group, but at the same point, everything can be moved apart, so it can be a very large space as well. Here's another example of the whole class. So when you're thinking of whole class learning, multiple tables and chairs all on wheels, so you could reutilize this space in multiple ways, and you see a smartboard at the front of the room. This is another example of how a library could be set up. You see that those hexagon shapes are the nooks for students. You see that there's a student gathering, whole class space. Those yellow pieces of furniture give kids the space to sit on, and storage space as well. Another view of the same library. This is where there would be a whole class space to work. Here you see some of the different kinds of seating, those chairs that can go together to turn into a bench. You see that bench on the right-hand side. There's a counter for students to work. This could be more of a maker space kind of counter, and low seating that's very movable for kids. Here you see those cubes, also again for table work or for seating. Again, another setup of a library where you see multiple areas for collaboration. Libraries are really reinvented here. So it's not just a place where you can get books, it's really a place where you can think, collaborate, be creative, and spend a good amount of time doing critical thinking. I just love this one. The little cutouts there where kids could have a little reading nook right in the bookshelves. This you see a whiteboard wall or a glass wall, and I like the flower shapes because here you see that there's multiple uses. The kids could use that center as a table. They could use all of it as an area for seating. They could pull the stools apart. Here's another idea of Book Nook, where kids could find a spot to relax and read with a book. And finally, this last picture shows you an example of makerspace. You see the Lego wall, you see multiple tables for kids to work and really design and create together. This is just the last quote from Yoko Ono that I found. A dream you dream alone is only a dream you dream together is reality. So really thinking about what could this space be. One of the things that we wanted to talk about was the idea of the why. Why is this space a space that would be beneficial to Hillside? And really what we think about is the idea of if we're going to create a space, we want to create a space that would really meet our expanding needs. So what are those needs? Well, we want to get kids into this space more often, and we want them to be able to be there for longer. So by having a library that is really a learning commons, it gives us the opportunity for students to visit that space more than just once a cycle. They have the opportunity to go there for many different aspects of learning. They can go there for collaboration. They can go there for reading time. They can go there for whole class learning. But there's multiple opportunities for them to benefit from such a learning space. When we think about the 4 functions of a library, the first function is really that collaboration piece. And you know, the fact that pedagogy has shifted and learning is more team-oriented, this lends itself to the ability to give kids that opportunity for collaboration. We think about the individual space, the idea that we want to give the kids those quiet reading spaces, so when they're doing their independent reading, they have a setup that really works for them. We want to make sure that we can recognize the need for specialty spaces. So when we're doing book clubs, when we're doing makerspace, when we're doing group projects, a learning commons allows us to have a really good imagination spot for those kids. And then, of course, access, giving kids the opportunity in that learning commons to access not only books but also technology as well. We recognize that the library is often a selling point for districts. Sometimes when prospective families come through the building and they see, I can tell you right now that when they walk through our Hillside Library, there are so many delicious books that are out for kids. People always walk in and ooh and ah because it's already special. But the idea of turning it into a learning commons that gives us the opportunity for further opportunity for students is a really wonderful opportunity for us. So that's exciting. The next piece that I wanted to talk about was the cafetorium.
Veronica, is it doubling the space of the library, correct? Like if the library were, I thought there was like, it was...
Can we get what are the space numbers?
I wanted to say that the current library is 1,100 and it goes to like 2,000 or something. Or 1074.
Okay. Yes, so the current library is 1,565 square feet, I believe. And the cafeteria right now is currently 2,315. I could be a little off, the numbers are a little blurry.
I think actually that library number is lower just because I'm going to be on the, but again, you are picking up another 800 square feet. It's a lot larger.
Shall I continue?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. The next space that we are imagining is the cafetorium space. That's the space of this addition. And what would the benefits be of adding this space to Hillside? So the first thing we want to talk about is really the flexibility in scheduling. By having a larger cafeteria space, it gives us the ability to have more than one grade in that area at one time. And this really opens up our schedule. What we know about scheduling is that a strong schedule truly impacts the instruction in a building. And right now we do have some challenges with traffic flow because we have a lot of grades moving at one time. So this takes away the instructional minutes because transition time is critical. By being able to have more flexibility in scheduling, the cafetorium will allow for that. It also gives us a stage with better viewing opportunities, and this was what we talked about before with Veronica. The stage that we currently have at Hillside in the all-purpose room is very low. And we looked with Joe at the idea of raising the stage, but the ceiling is low. So it wouldn't work to raise the stage up. But when our families come to watch performances of our kids, their eye level is not much higher than the stage, so it's very difficult to see their youngsters. They're not looking up. If we were to have a stage in the cafetorium, it would be able to be designed in such a way that the presentation opportunity is just more optimal for viewing. In addition, we would also be using this space for both chorus and for band rehearsals, so that the students were in a performing space. The benefit of a cafetorium is that we have more time for kids to be able to get into that space. Right now, we can't use our all-purpose room easily for the stage because we have PE classes in there. And when we hold an assembly, our PE classes are impacted. So the students that are in PE have an assembly scheduled during their PE time. But we would be able to schedule assemblies in the cafetorium at times that were different than PE, so it wouldn't impact our students' instructional minutes of PE. In addition, having a cafeteria, of course, would reduce any stigma of free and reduced lunch, so we see that as an opportunity. We also see the fact that because it's a larger space, if our population continues to grow and we have a 7th section, the cafeteria would be able to accommodate that 7th section of a grade level. Right now, we have 6 classes in our cafe, and it is between the 6 classes and then our peanut-free table, we are really at a maximum of space. So a new cafeteria would give us that benefit as well. It would also give us the opportunity for small group instruction. Right now we have some times where students are getting small group instruction, whether it might be reading instruction or another pullout, and space is always at a premium, and the cafeteria would give us the opportunity for teachers to pull a student and have a space to work with them that's not the hallway where it might be more disrupted. We also recognize the fact that there are many family nights at Hillside, and the family nights have been impacted. When I first arrived here, a new floor was put down at Hillside in the all-purpose room. That floor cannot have any food served because it stains the floor. So as a result, some of our events have had to be moved. We had our HEF movie night moved into the cafe for the last 2 years, but it proved to be difficult because it's very tight. So this year, the movie night is being moved over here to the middle school. So in order to be able to house those special events at Hillside, a cafetorium would be an ideal situation. In addition, we have other nights like our STEAM fair. We have to always worry about slime because kids are always creating slime in our STEAM fair, so we always have to make sure that there's something below. Kids do create cookies. You know, some have baking soda, some don't, and now there's food in the all-purpose room even though there's not supposed to be. So these are some of the challenges that we deal with, and having a cafetorium where there's supposed to be food and a tile floor would probably also be a great situation for us.
Quick question?
Yes, please.
Maybe this is for you, because it sounds like we made a mistake by putting that floor down.
No.
That's
It's for a gym floor.
It's a padded floor.
Oh, really?
It's what they're using all over Europe now. It's easier on the knees. It's better for if you fall on it. So that's where they're going, I guess, now with these gym floors.
It's a great floor for a gym. Yeah, it's a great floor for a gym.
So really, it was never, it's designed for a gym. It's like the all-purpose room's a gym, so the floor is for PE, not for
However, it
PE.
stains from alcohol, so the cleaning, the hand sanitizers or Gatorade or something like that will stain it because it's a pad.
Well, maybe not that we made a mistake on the floor, but it was the wrong floor for the uses that it was used for, right?
Maybe.
So how much does it cost to replace that back to a different floor?
I don't know. I don't know if maybe a different color. You know, maybe a darker color. Maybe that would work. Or
But didn't we already replace, we already had to replace, the
Yeah,
floor
we-
was already ripped up and replaced because of stain.
which one?
The new one?
The
All-purpose
hillside,
one.
yeah, they redid it once, yes.
Yeah, that's
Since they put the new one in?
Yeah.
Yeah,
We didn't pay for it.
as Joe Marie
The hand
mentioned.
sanitizer.
Yeah, as Joe Marie mentioned, the floor is geared specifically towards athletic, for the athletic use, because there is no other gym in the building, and that's for the safety of the kids, so.
Yeah, the other floor was unsafe, so that, although it was better for food, it wasn't like kids were falling and sliding because it's a different kind of floor for the surface. But it's not, like even with our gyms here, we don't allow food in them either for the same reason.
Got it. So going back to the old way of having events in there doesn't sound like a solution at all, right?
The challenge is that having an event in the all-purpose room means no food. So, and that's been challenging because sometimes, mistakes happen. So we worry. We also recognize the fact that having a cafetorium would give us additional space. So on rainy days where the kids are held inside for early morning recess or late bus recess, we would have another space for kids. In addition, our after-school programs are sharing spaces constantly. So having an additional space would be optimal for the after-school programming for our students. And then, of course, probably the biggest sell factor is the fact that it would be an air-conditioned space. So on back-to-school night and graduation, parents and students and staff would be very comfortable. So that's certainly something that would be a very big positive for Hillside.
Amy, I just have a quick question. Since we're using assembly time during PE periods, are we in any sort of danger of missing our mandated minutes because all of our assemblies are during the students' PE time?
Yep. So we actually try our best to not impact our students. So if there's a way that they can go outside, they do. Otherwise, they could go into their classrooms, and they do movement in their classrooms, but it's just not optimal. So,
So it's not that their PE time is their assembly, it's the classes scheduled for PE are moving?
Not always. Sometimes it is the assembly, though.
Oh, okay.
If we're doing a whole school assembly, like we just had a whole school assembly that was wonderful. The Afro-Peruvian musicians came in. It was a whole school assembly, and it was scheduled at a time where somebody did miss PE. That happens occasionally, but we are still over the minutes, so we're okay. But we'd love to not be impacted. Yeah. The final piece that I'd like to talk about is really the idea of how classroom space and related service space would be impacted. So if we did the addition and we had more room for classrooms, one of the biggest wins would be to be able to get our classrooms grouped. One of the things that I did right after my first year was I made a lot of classroom changes with our staff. And although our custodial staff was sweating over it, the reality is we got our teams together, and that really increased collaboration. So now all of our fourth grade teachers are upstairs in the intermediate wing together. Our third grade teachers are in the intermediate wing on the top and bottom floors, but they're grouped together. All of our second grade teachers have a partner, but the problem is second grade is split between the intermediate wing and the primary wing. So by having the additional classrooms, we'd be able to move all of our second grade teachers over to the primary wing, keeping all of our grades together, optimizing the collaboration, and then our intermediate wing would just be third grade and fourth grade, but we could also use those spaces for our related services. We also recognize the fact that having related services together is a benefit. So our problem-solving team is all of our support services, our speech and language, our behavior, our occupational therapists, and our reading specialists. They're all together in our PST, but then they're all separated within the building. So what we would look to do with the addition of additional space is create an area where all of our related services are also together, because that's how we could really share resources, share ideas, and collaborate, because we know that's what really pushes the mark and gives teachers extra ideas and possibilities. Finally, the last piece is the conference room space. By having an addition, it would guarantee us that we have a conference room space. Right now, we have a very, very small conference room that is across from John's office. It's windowless, and it just fits the table and chairs and people. But it's not an ideal conference room space. We created it because we had no other space. So we knew we needed something, and we're very lucky to have it, but we need more space. We are using right now the downstairs space, which is the area that doesn't have the windows, but that is also a music space. So anytime we have to have a conference in there and use it as a conference room, we have to go into the, I don't know if it's the boiler room, and pull out tables and chairs. So you're always changing over the two spaces. So the idea of having a conference room where teachers can meet together, parents can meet together, would really be ideal.
And I think also, Amy, it's pretty obvious, but without doing this addition, you would not be able to do the library, the music room, because obviously you still need that to function as it currently does.
Correct.
Okay, before we go, I just want to, we haven't had an opportunity as a board to step back and just talk about the bond at just a high level. I think we're at risk of just diving down into, floors and gyms and stuff, which is important stuff, but at the same time, I think we just want to step back as a board right now and just, I mean, if you could all stay, that'd be great. And just have a broad conversation about, I think we've had several presentations now where we've not had an opportunity to just have a conversation about it. I think there's a variety of different things. Thank you, Amy, for that presentation. And so I just want to, you still may have the same comment, but I just want to kick it off to the whole group to just talk about kind of where your current thinking is right now amongst a variety of different bond items across option 1, 2, 3. It's also worth noting to the public that it's framed in this presentation as option 1, 2, or 3. That's to a degree somewhat arbitrary. Any option could be, any piece of any of that could be option 1 or 2, or there could be 6 options. We could really do what we want. And so it's really incumbent upon the board to, I think, process the conversations, really process what the public is thinking as well, process what we're hearing from the administrators as to what's required. We look forward to hearing from Gail and Lou on the high school space. It was great to see that today. Hadn't seen that before. So there's still a lot of discussion and processing going on. So with that, I just want to kick it out to the board and just see at a high level what everyone's thinking.
Yeah, I mean, do you want to say what you were going to say before? I mean, I have a proposal that I want to throw out to the board in terms of my thinking. Do you want to?
My question was really a detailed question, which I guess I'll just ask now, and then we'll jump to your proposal and go on high level. How large is a square footage question? How large, you talked about the cafe, I guess, is 20, what do we say, 23, 23 something? Because we're going
2315, we said.
23. So that's our current cafeteria is 23. What's the proposed cafeteria under the addition?
The proposed cafeteria is 4,300 square feet, and the stage is 1,700 square feet.
Okay. And the stage in the multi-purpose room right now?
Is 520 square feet.
Good. Okay, so 13. Yeah, they're big. Good. Okay. Okay. So I just wanted to, because I know that building, but to move from diagram to mental dimension, I kind of need to know what scale we're talking about. Shoot.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was great seeing the visuals. I think, I know I talked to Doug, and I think you had mentioned this a lot about seeing visuals really is helpful. I do feel, though, that we're trying to tackle too much with this huge bond initiative because, and that said, I'm not saying we should not talk about the bond and do some form of a bond, but the superintendent search is our #1 priority this year. We haven't even really dug into that. That's going to be heating up. We're going to be doing interviews around the time that we're going to be heating up with the discussions about the bond in January, February. Special ed is really still the second priority in my mind because, we'll see what Dr. Katzman says when she comes back. There's a lot more to discuss with there. So I view the bond as a third priority, and the amount of time that, well, one, to hit the summer 2020, we're really just 3 or 4 months away. So I view this sort of pivot to a larger vision discussion as really healthy, but I don't see us getting there on Hillside, middle school, and high school in the next 3 months. So, and I really do think the superintendent search, once it starts to heat up, is going to take a lot more of our time. So my suggestion is, one, we have the baseline items that seem pretty clear cut in terms of things that we need to do at some point pretty soon. If we decide as a board that we want to have sort of a more larger vision discussion, I think we have to narrow it down to one. I think we'll, because I don't see how we can do that for Hillside, middle school, and high school within the time frame that we're talking, unless we want to say that the vision discussion is something that, if we miss the February or March time frame, we're into the next summer anyway. So unless we say we want to have that larger vision discussion down the road, I personally think that I just don't see, we kind of stick to the rigid open meeting laws that really only allow us to talk about this every 2 weeks. We have like 5 more board meetings 6 more board meetings before we get to sort of the time when we have to start to take a vote on this stuff. My personal opinion is that if we had to look at a school that we wanted to hone in on, it is Hillside, because a lot of these sort of related service space issues, if we can do things to create a better learning environment for special ed, then the special ed issues in middle school and high school kind of go away if we can kind of resolve some of those issues for students in elementary school. So my personal opinion is that there's zero way that we can actually do a really dive deep vision discussion for all three schools before February, March timeframe. Because I've been at these meetings since February, last February. We're making incremental progress, but I think considering that in my mind this is a third priority, I don't see how we can't start to really hone in on the scope of what we're actually discussing right now for a late February, early March vote.
Yeah. Well, I think you do have to consider doing some work now. I mean, everything is...
No, I didn't say not to do anything.
No, I know, and I think I just wanted to mention about Hillside again, because we did talk more about the vision tonight. We do have some significant space issues currently that then will require the board to make decisions that you may have to own out for a few years, because even though we've talked about the need for trailers, because I think they touched on it tonight, we have quite a few spaces that are being used for special education that are out of compliance. We need to come up with a strategy to address that in the short term, but the longer you put off the bond, you're talking about potentially having trailers at Hillside for a much longer point. We also have other opportunities which we can reduce music and other things to allow for that or increase class sizes. But I do think the Hillside conversation in my mind, because of the significance of class sizes and special education that needs to be addressed there, is something that I would agree that some other, maybe the locker room conversation we put off, I think those are things, but I have some serious concerns about Hillside in the current, because I think there's 8 spaces currently that are out of compliance with special education. I don't think you have the luxury of putting those off for 3 years. You know what I mean? Like without having...
Well, that's...
Well, we still have to find
I just want to make sure everyone gets an opportunity to talk.
You want to go, Lauren?
Yeah.
First? Well, why don't we just go around the table? Maybe unless
Yeah,
the issue.
I don't really feel like this decision-making process is a burden on us. I feel like it's an opportunity, and it's an opportunity for us to build a structural vision that matches the vision that we're talking about in a curricular sense, and with our new leadership that will be coming in. And I feel like, to me, I don't feel like this decision-making is a burden at all. In fact, I feel very inspired by it. And my hope is that with a small incremental amount, that adding on these not must-dos, our community can get behind the future of our schools in the long term in terms of the physical structure that our students and teachers are working in.
You want to go?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I'll share my thoughts on this while at the same time, I guess, responding to some of your concerns, Jeremy. Which, I think let me start with the first, which is the superintendent search. I do think that we have superintendent search in flight. As you know, the ads get posted, no one will start to get indications of interest. And I think we've done this before. And we could all debate, that process, but we've done this before. I think we have some experience. I think Charlie's engagement around this will be valuable. So I think you're absolutely right. We will be reviewing a number of candidates, et cetera, but I don't think it becomes all-encompassing. I think we have the bandwidth to work on multiple things. I think similar can be said about special education. We will get Dr. Katzman's report. I think that the strength of the special education office now versus 12, 18 months ago is in a different place. I think the connectivity between SEPTA, the administration, and the teachers, administration referring to Laura's office, is also in a better place than it was 12, 18 months ago. And that's by no means to say take one's foot off the pedal, but it does highlight the degree to which we can be working on other things, because I think the work that the board and the administration, primarily the administration, I guess I would say, and the teachers has done. So now we get to this bond issue, and I guess there's two things, right? There's one, the issue maybe of it feeling a bit rushed or not rushed, but now we're getting into rubber meets the road type of situation, as you just referenced, six meetings before big decisions have to get made. But one thing that comes to mind is that there's never a good time to ask the community for money. Right? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's never going to be a time where people are like, yeah, let's do it. Let's increase your expenses. But one thing that really strikes me, obviously there's $10 million that we need to do, right? Like it just is. And we could debate whether it should be 10 million, but you know, it is what it is, and that's what it's going to be, you know? So that's that. And then we need to start, and that should just happen. That shouldn't get put off, and I think you agree with that. And then there's this question of, if we're going to go through all this effort of doing the $10 million worth of work, are we supposed to think really seriously, long and hard about the incremental ask and what the value for it is? And I will tell you, just my own perspective, like houses, and I felt this way about I feel all the same emotions and thoughts from the track debate of 8 years ago to now, coming back, which is families move to Hastings by and large for the schools. Those families move in with elementary age and pre-elementary age children. To your point about educational issues in middle school and high school being headed off by, you know, risk of being hyperbolic, a world-class experience in K through 4. So those two things are important things. Why families move to Hastings, and what meaningful long-term investment in our elementary both gives families a reason to be excited and to select Hastings over competing districts, and then also this educational long-term impact on the educational experience of our students in middle school and high school. So it gets me to a place where I think it's a lot. I think we have a lot going on. There's no question about it. But I get to there's no time like the present for us to try to do the lot. Now, obviously, being a bit, maybe not obviously, I am a bit concerned about our year-over-year budget increase last year. I'm a bit concerned about the annual operating expense once this is all done. You know, there's the cost of building it, and as Lisa raised a great question, you know, I think probably the last meeting, there's the cost of building it, and then there's the cost of running it. I don't know that it's probably that much larger, because we're not talking about new, you know, significant new services that are going to require new professionals, but it's something we have to think about.
It's really just the heating and cooling of the space.
Yeah.
Within our current
Maintenance.
Just to
Custodial.
clarify, I wasn't saying we shouldn't have a vision discussion potentially about Hillside. I was saying we should hone in and say we're just going to talk about Hillside.
Yeah.
We still have the middle school and high school.
Yes.
And are we really going to have a discussion about all three visions and really get that done?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's fair. And I think personally, as I sort of muse around this, I get to a point that the hurdle to do a major investment in middle and high is harder. It's a higher hurdle for me personally than elementary. You know, like I think, and almost there to a certain degree, maybe, and probably shouldn't say this in like a taped venue, but like, you know, sort of suffering from their own success. The high school has been just one accolade after another, right? And so then you say, okay, where do we need to really focus our monies on, you know, giving the youngest kids the best and broadest experience? Kind of gets me to the elementary. So in any case, that's my thought. I don't think, I hear what you're saying, like, okay, we're going to do vision statement, elementary, vision, middle, high. That seems like a lot. But I don't think I guess from my perspective, we shouldn't let the uncertainty around this issue, the uncertainty around essentially borrowing money and going to the community to ask them to support that, stop us from, you know, trying to do something meaningful in the elementary. That's my thought. top that.
I can't. You said a lot of what I was going to say, but which is fine. So, Doug, I'm glad that you suggested that we have sort of a broader discussion of it. And Jeremy, I'm not sure that I see it quite the same way, for many of the same reasons that Tim said. But, you know, I do, yes, our superintendent search is number one, but I do think that's sort of, that train is moving along. And I think we're going to, it can be time-consuming in a certain amount of time, and you rise to the occasion and you do it. I mean, it's part of what we have to do. I don't agree with you that special ed is necessarily, even though it certainly is a priority. I don't think that it's a priority. It's a priority of the district and for the board, but I don't think it's a priority in terms of time that we have to spend. A work that the board has to do. I think we have to be engaged in it. We have to make sure things are moving along. And, you know, we're engaged certainly in terms of Dr. Katzman coming, but I don't think we're doing the work of special ed or what needs to be done there. I don't see that that's a board responsibility. Yes, a responsibility to make sure that we're taking care of business, but not actually doing that work. The bond, I think it takes a while to wrap. For me, it took a while to wrap my head around it. And I think what's really important is that we try to have a vision for what we're trying to do, because when you first hear the whole option 1, option 2, you know, 7 million, 10 million, 60 million, 25 million, you know, it can feel incredibly overwhelming. And I think there's some kind of a balance between what we need. First of all, option 1 to me is what we need to do. That is option 1 in all 3 schools. What has to be done? That's a no-brainer. And then the other options, I think, are things that really take a little bit of time and thinking about in terms of what our needs are. And it's not just what we want or what would be wonderful, because I think we've all agreed, and we've talked before about what would be amazing, but it's also driven by what our needs are now that have changed over the years. Because quite frankly, and we'll go to the mat on this a little bit, I don't think the enrollment
thing is going to change.
I don't think there's any weight in the enrollment numbers, because we've had those numbers in the past. We'll have those numbers in the future. We'll go up and down. I don't think we can make this case based on enrollment, but I do think there is a case to be made about things that have changed in the needs of the district, and certainly at Hillside the needs in terms of space, and that really make us have to think what we're doing, and at the same time consider a vision. And I think Lauren's done a beautiful job of presenting us with some ideas about a vision and how we could envision a curriculum and a learning environment for students. It makes us then want to consider the other issues around what we would want to do with the space. But I think we have to see it in terms of the needs of the educational needs of the students and how the building's going to accommodate that. And I don't think it's about enrollment or having, you know, more sections. To me, the class size, even that, I have some issues with some of that. But I do think there are demands that people have to be made aware of that we haven't always had in the district, that make us have to give serious consideration to what do we do with that space. And in terms of these buildings, you know, yeah, you could say we've done a great job and the high school is an incredible place, and now this program that they told us about tonight, I mean, it's very exciting. And you always say to people, wait till your kids get to high school, they're going to love it. It is a great experience. But I do think that there are issues that maybe it is the time to think about the whole package. You know, I don't know if we want to deal with the whole locker room. If people ever took a little tour of the locker rooms and saw what they looked like, you know, from when, I don't know, our grandparents went to school here, people might want to rethink what we do in the locker room. Same with
they're not even in compliance with Title IX either.
Yeah, they're not in compliance with Title IX.
Yeah. No.
And same with having this space that we have that we could never use in the middle school auditorium, and as well as issues with asbestos and other things that we have to deal with. It just seems like maybe it is a time to really carefully, even though it feels pressured, that we really have to look at the big picture of where do we want the school to go, and then on top of, and then that has to be accompanied by some very clear numbers, not just about the cost, but really about the cost to the taxpayers, because I think that's where the rubber hits the road.
Sure.
And it's really, you know, what does it mean if we do a $7 million, $10 million, $25 million? What is that going to mean for my taxes at this time when people have just been reassessed? And I think that is very real, and I think we have to make that very real, very concrete, and it has to be a combination of, and I was not someone who was in favor originally of a lot of the proposals for Hillside, and the more I've been thinking about it and going over the need, hearing about the need and considering it, it becomes more and more of a reality to me of something that I think we should give serious consideration to, at least to give as an option. And one more thing I'll say, which is that in terms of the number of meetings, and it does feel a little, there does feel a pressure, but the truth is the facilities committee can do a lot of meetings where we deal with some of these issues. It doesn't have to just be a board meeting issue. We can present at every board meeting, but it doesn't have to be this be the place where everything gets considered and decided. And we can also have a community meeting, like we've done in the past with the other bond, where we have a big community meeting or two where we're presenting things and inviting people to come and hear everything and understand, you know, from A to Z, where we started and where we are. And so I don't think it has to just be, because we've got a lot of other things that we do here. We can't spend every board meeting doing 2 or 3 hours of the bond. So.
Good. Yeah, no, I didn't think I'm going to be much more brief. Jeremy, I think you and I share some reservations. I think hearing all of this, it would be magical and wonderful to have all these things happening at the same time, but I hear what you're saying, and I have to say that I do share some of your feelings, especially listening to the presentation and seeing all these wonderful images of library common areas that would enhance our students' learning in great ways. But thinking about programmatically what we need, I feel like I still have a lot of questions about how these changes are going to be solving some of the programmatic things that we need. Like, I'm concerned about the rooms that we are still out of compliance with, special ed. I don't think that we've addressed those things. I think we're talking about a cafetorium, even though our current cafe sits empty and unused for some periods of time. I think we're talking about parking spaces, but I don't really see some other things that I still have burning questions about. So I feel like it's a really good time that we're talking about it, but I feel like I really need to look more into how our bond is addressing some of those things, because I disagree with you, Jody. I do think it's more of our job to look in with a stronger hand with the audit and make sure things are moving a little more quickly than they have been. So that's sort of my 2 cents on it for right now.
And before you go, I mean, my thing is really a timing issue, because I mean, these are all great discussions, but you know, we've had one public comment by email. We haven't had a community forum. We had talked about, you know, getting public feedback at the board meetings. That hasn't worked. So we need to do a community forum, but to get to that, we have to have a plan, and we need to take steps tonight to get to a community forum with a plan, and I don't think we're there yet. So how are we going to get, you're saying we need to have community forums, well, when's that going to happen? And how do we get to what we're talking to them about? And, you know, it's almost November. So you know, we're trying to get to this end of February date so we don't lose a year. And there are things that we need to do, which would be terrible to lose a year on. But, you know, if we're not going to be ready for a community forum, then why not take the extra 10 months to really do this vision discussion correctly? Or we need to agree that, you know, because middle school and high school are going to come up here and they're going to show pictures, and I'm going to love everything I see in those two. And the fact is, you know, we're going to look at them, we're going to say this would be great too, maybe, you know, I changed my mind again. But 3 months ago was July. We have 3 months until February, so it's not that far away. So it's really a timing issue for me.
I just want to start, because I think the reality is we've agreed that $12 million worth of work has to be done. That's going to require, the last bond was less than that, and it required a lot of community forums anyway. So you're going to have to move forward with that. Part of what the board has to understand, and again, I know with Hillside there's a lot of questions, but in terms of space, although we were highlighting some, because this is what we were asked to do by Doug about the programs, by adding space, it takes care of other space issues that we currently have. Without doing this addition, we are not going to be able to address the spaces that are out of compliance. By adding those 4 classrooms, we were looking, again, because I think we, with all our discussions, and the board has been given a lot of information on this, I know the board understands that there is a current space issue. You can debate the enrollment, you can debate the numbers. Every section, every classroom is used up there. We have many spaces. 7 this year that are out of compliance. The board is aware of it. That is a responsibility of the board as well. It's not only for finding a superintendent. You have a responsibility that that Joe, myself, the architects have presented to you, that we have a space issue in compliance with special education. If you are going to continue, there's going to be a few things that have to be considered. One, which we already spoke about in the facilities meeting, but again, we're using this time tonight, is a potential to add either a trailer next year to, move some of the things outside so we can address it. We've already identified, we could speak to that for another 2 hours. We already have a plan to address for next year. Some of those plans are going to require specials to be pushed out. It's just, or you can either have higher class numbers. These are like reality of your decisions. So my concern is, there is another year you'd be putting this off. We have to do a bond anyway. That's going to require the same amount of time for $12 million. Whether you do 12 or 17, you're going to have to go to the public. We're going to have to have the same amount of meetings. I can tell you that for $8 million, we did 15 meetings. We'll start them tomorrow. I mean, that is a responsibility we have to do. I'm sorry. And then there is the bonding amount. We've spoken about this a lot. The interest rate is creeping up. To be honest with you, the last bond wasn't even the amount that we originally wanted to do. We really scaled that down because there was a concern about economics at the time. We started this process last year. The board, like I had said last year, we need to do a bond last year. Like, there is a time that you're pushing our work. It's becoming more expensive. The interest rate has gone up 1 or 2% in that, or 1% in that time frame. And, so I'm just very concerned because there's a situation in Hillside that has to be addressed in the short term, but also I'm hoping that the trailer would be a short-term solution, because either that or it's going to continue.
Right, but the bond's not going to address the space issue for next year.
Well, we have things that we have ideas of how to address it, but I would think that in the short term addressing it, knowing there's a long-term problem and not, also addressing that is we're going to address it next year. Be sure of that. There's going to be, we already have a plan in place about moving spaces around, about, certain people are going to have to move, and again, we're going to present the board 2 or 3 options, and some of it's going to be programmatic. It's just the reality. Everyone's aware of it, and we're going to have to make some choices in addition to either how many trailers we want to have, right? So that's a solution for next year. But I think the board has said, and we've heard from the public, having a trailer for 1 year next year is one thing, having trailers for multiple years is another. So if you do not do anything, I'm just putting it out there, you will have trailers on the property for multiple years.
This is actually, exactly to that point, I think when we get to this idea of community forums and explaining the importance of doing this, putting down really articulating, honestly, just having you write up and share with the board.
We can change class size. I mean, there's many ways you can get to that with a program. I mean, that's the board's decision, but we're giving the options. And one of them is to look forward to doing the bond.
But these options need to be spelled out because they're the options that we're going to put forward in community forums to explain why. So when you say to me there's a space issue at Hillside, I appreciate where you're coming from. When we say to 7,500 residents, there's a space issue at Hillside, I can't guarantee that it's going to be well communicated. So the issues that have created the space tightness and the options that we are going to be deciding between as a board, which I think we can agree that we hope that they are temporary options as opposed to permanent options, that essentially background information is important background information for it to be documented, shared, and that's going to be the backbone, I think, a large part of our community discussions. Because when we talk about this relevance or the necessity of doing this, that's going to be a big part of it.
because, I mean, even, although we're not talking about saying there was the last facilities meeting, which Jeremy, you were not there, and Lauren was there, we did address those issues, and I mean, we clearly articulated where these space issues are, and we, we're looking at them, I've been at the buildings, we've all been up there, I mean, this is all we kind of have done, and we're trying to address it, but I guess my concern is this idea that we have, like, I think there's the vision, but like I've said, I know that's important to the board, but there is also like a current space issue, and that this, there's going to be a cost to putting it off. That's all I'm saying, and I think
we all agree.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I think we all agree with that, like wholeheartedly, and none of us want to see program cut or bigger class sizes. I think I'm not misspeaking when I say that about each person sitting here. However, I think the data that we've been getting has been changing. Like, we had data about class sizes, and then we had a different data about class sizes. And to Jody's point, I also don't think that this heap of class size is necessarily going to be an ongoing issue. I think it's an issue. Maybe we'll have trailers for a couple of years, and I think, like she said, it's not necessarily going to be an issue that we're always facing with in terms of enrollment.
Can I say a couple things?
So, hold on, I'm going to be done in a quick second. So I just think in terms of even the data that we are putting out, if we could all come to sort of at least have that same data, because I think it's a lot of different points coming at us, and the original enrollment forms that we had for projections, and then we got an addendum that you had sent out. I just feel like it's changing.
But I think it only changed to go up. There was one data point that was slightly different, but I mean, it pretty much, I mean, our last 3 years of enrollment, we have gone up almost 7% as a district. And again, that's just based upon like live birth data. And I would agree it goes, it ebbs and flows, but I do think, I don't believe it'll go back down. And again, I'm not, a person who doesn't.
I don't even think it's relevant if it goes back down. If it just stays flat, we've changed services in Hillside.
That's the bottom line.
Such that we have special education services in non-compliant facilities that aren't going to change magically on their own. So we can either decide that we are external trailers as our.
But we haven't even talked about that. Like, where is the communications class going to be going? Things like that. I feel like it's taking a turn, not focusing on necessarily the programs that we have housed that we should be worrying about.
We have additional people that we didn't have before, additional psychologists, guidance counselors, providers, that there wasn't a need for space. But Maureen, I want to say something to you, because it was really at the facilities committee meeting when we presented and looked at Hillside and looked at the space and saw what was being done where and what was out of compliance. For me, I have to be honest with you, that was what started to change that's where I started to pivot a little bit on how I saw Hillside and what we need to be doing there. And I think that is what needs to be being explained.
Well, can I just ask, but Nanisha, you refers to something we don't have room for right now?
Right, so like that's what I was more worrying, like I haven't really heard that, so if it was discussed at the facilities meeting, I wasn't there, but like those are the types of things that I'm thinking about that I don't necessarily see how this plan is automatically addressing.
But it's still a space issue, right?
So, because it is a space issue, yeah, so
Okay,
that's
so
what
it's still a space issue.
that's what I'm thinking of, because the forest classroom, wait,
Those would be used for special education.
all of them, because it was saying primary.
We would move existing speech rooms, we would create like suites over there, but again, picking up, when you pick up, just even in terms of the numbers, we know that we're currently short, I would say, 2 classrooms this year, at least about 1,500 square feet or maybe even 1,800 square feet, but we would be picking up almost 4,000 square feet by adding just the classroom space, which we would then be able to move, music. Well, no, I'm not talking about music, we're moving the
Right, no,
classroom,
that's what I was, because the 4 classrooms that we were talking about were the primary, so it might have been my assumption was first and second.
I was moving some classrooms, but the idea again, that would be to pick up and kind of redesign the suite. I think because we've spoken about the special education and we didn't want to, I think we were told not to, it's a part of it, but it's not the sole focus. Like, we're not creating it because of special education. It's just a part of everything we offer. So it's not about the special ed population. But it's certainly the special ed, the special ed are related.
Right, I'm not saying it's about the special ed, but when we're talking about how wonderful it would be for a music suite for chorus and band and strings or whatever to be together, I think that's beautiful, and I agree. But then I'm thinking about, what about the communications class that we said we would probably be needing the K2, the 3.5. Like,
But it's still a space issue, though, right?
right. So I'm saying that's the space issue
So,
that I think.
yeah.
Right.
Can I just try to pull everyone back into just a couple core conversations here I think that we're having? There's a space conversation. I think we could debate how tight is it? Is it really tight? Is it kind of tight? Is it a little bit tight? But I think there's general consensus that it's kind of tight, right? Like there's some tightness. Could we survive it? Probably. And I think there's also some rationale from what I'm hearing in the group here that someone could make an argument. A lot of people could make an argument, you got to do something about it now. And some people could say, well, we could still shuffle the deck a lot, but we're probably out of compliance, we've learned in the last couple of weeks. And so that adds a whole new element. Any way you get at it, I think no matter how you look at this, there's some sort of space issue, whether what it's used for, how it's used, it's going to have to be addressed. I think that's one thing. But I think if you layer on top of that, I think some conversations with Lauren recently around just the developmental nature of education and the developmental spaces that we're creating have had a pretty profound impact on me. And, you know, I've had to kind of reconnect myself with, I studied environmental psychology in college and, like, forgot all the coursework, so I went back and, like, read some of that stuff. I'm like, space matters, you know what I mean? It's like, this is what I learned for 4 years in college, and then I went off and did stuff in the business world, and I'm like, yeah, space, okay. But space matters, and highly reflective spaces, and spaces that create collaboration, and spaces that create an opportunity for the sort of problem and project-based learning and critical thinking that our children are going to need throughout their life matter. These sorts of spaces matter, and quite frankly, Hillside wasn't set up to support those sorts of spaces. And, you know, God bless Amy and John. I know when you come here, you really try to put this is your job. I mean, if you came up and said, there's a lot of stuff I'd love to change, you're like, well, no, I have to put a good face on this. And I can see through it sometimes. I can see through you wanting to say, this is an issue, that's an issue, I really want this. And you've never complained to me, you've never said anything. But just as someone who's wandered that building, I can tell you that, you know, I go into the library and then I look at libraries like the one we saw, and you know, that has an impact to people who are coming to see our schools, their property values. I still remember one of the greatest things I think about a year ago, Mike Holstein, the former board president, was here, and he said one thing. He said, give people something they can get excited about. Yeah. We've been having debates. I've been on the board for 3 years. It's been, I like this, I like this, I like this. I mean, it's just this knit. We're not selling anything big here. We're not talking about big stuff that we can be doing. It's all, I saw this piece of data, I saw that piece of data, and it's like the kids are nowhere near this conversation the whole time. Like, I don't know how many conversations we've had about children at this table. We've been debating the merits of this document versus that document, and the kids keep getting lost. And that's one of the things I found really inspiring about your presentation today. It was filled with kids doing learning, right? Learning in a lot of collaborative different ways. We may not do this bond. We may not do it at this size. We may not do, but I think we have to have the conversation about the spaces we want to create and the vision of what that looks like. And if we take it to the town in a vision and the town says, not buying it, then I feel we've done our job.
Yeah, I think there's another thing to add here too, which is in addition to the kids, I think it's also about the staff in Hillside. I think you have a fairly young staff relative to, if you look at the average tenure of the staff at Hillside relative to the middle school and the high school, and I think there's an opportunity to get the staff excited and, you know, effectively build, in addition to building space, establishing a culture that becomes a lasting culture for, you know, decades to come. And there's no guarantee that, you know, new educational spaces do that. But I'm pretty certain that they don't work against that. And so I think about that as a, as a additional benefit of really, you know, thinking long and hard and working towards a meaningful addition in Hillside. You get this sort of complementary dynamic.
Can I just say one thing? I think related to the staff and faculty that I think it could have a huge impact. Just thinking about the intentionality of spaces, and that's really has a huge impact on students and their learning, but also on the teachers. I mean, imagine if you were a music teacher and you didn't have to worry about whether your lesson was in the cafe or going to be in a windowless classroom.
no, 100%.
But then again, it was in the space that was intentionally made for you to have great, meaningful instruction with your students. I think it frees up teachers to really care more, even though we have teachers that care tremendously. It allows them to really dig deeper into the learning process of their students if the spaces are really supporting the intentionality of that learning process.
Can I just say something on the space issue? Because there was a misunderstanding at the last meeting that needs to be set straight. There was a comment that was made that the special ed department or leadership was opposed really to having more students brought back to the district, that this wasn't something they were interested in doing. In speaking with the special ed leadership, nothing could be farther from the truth. The fact is that the misunderstanding is over a statement that was made by the special ed department that they weren't interested in the approach taken by, say, an Ardsley or some of the Pleasantville and so on. There are actually districts that have gone out to bring in students from other districts to along with their own kids to inhabit structures and programs, which is a money-making proposition. Our staff simply was trying to make the point they weren't interested in going there, and I don't think if we had a discussion on it, I'd be surprised if anyone around this table would be interested in going into that business either. But certainly our special ed staff is very much interested in bringing kids back to district. And in fact, and I want to quote Maureen tonight, who can say, I think was saying this.
It was so good.
No, it was very good. No, you were making the point that indeed, and I forget the time frame you mentioned, but that the number of students brought to district was significant. That there's something like 30 out of 60 kids.
Oh, you meant when I was talking about like 10 years ago when I was looking at
So we have, let there be no mistake about this, we are in the process and have been bringing back kids to district. And in fact, there was a great interest in bringing in more. Now, here's the problem. Here's the good news. If we could do that, this is what we were in a discussion that brought this out last meeting. It's a win-win-win situation, because first of all, you are bringing your own kids back for a better education in their own school system. You are saving a bundle of money than you do otherwise by paying kids to go to these other systems. And of course, of course you should be doing this, and of course we want to do it, and we have done it successfully. But this is another casualty of the space issue. If indeed you don't build any additional classrooms, certainly this has been demonstrated over at the elementary structure, you're never going to do this, even though as a matter of policy it's something we should be striving to do. Consider it.
Just to close the loop here, what I'm hearing from everyone is that you are all sort of in agreement, or maybe that Hillside is sort of a higher priority than middle school and high school.
Well, we haven't heard the presentation.
I don't know that I would say that.
Yeah, okay. I haven't heard their presentation yet.
So you're not willing to say, let's hone in this discussion for the February.
Well, let's see what happens when Gail and Lou are putting thoughts together, right?
When do they present
next
November 5,
meeting, yeah,
right?
November
November
5,
5th. They're coming, and I think then we'll have another conversation.
And I think in the meanwhile, it wouldn't hurt, Maureen, if you send around to the board an email that just walks through. It's a very short email, but it is an ask. Just walks through what the incremental tax burden is.
I mean, I have it here, I'll put it in an email.
Yeah, I just like to have it sort of printed out, to keep it in a folder of bond-related things, and that's something. And we're going to be merging that conversation into our annual budgeting discussion in terms of how much can we move our year-on-year budget if our capital project ask is X, and so we'll talk about that. But so yeah, I'm in the same place I think as the rest of my colleagues on the board. Like, I'm not counting out middle school, I'm not counting out high school, but certainly I think the discussion around the needs at Hillside have coalesced to really make the needs more clear to me than they were a month ago. And now we have to work on, okay, what's the scope of, or at least I'm speaking my opinion, but what's the scope of work we can afford to do that makes meaningful change within Hillside?
And I mean, that's because, again, I feel like like Doug said, when you go up there, and I would encourage, I think the board you should go do another walkthrough, but when students are in session and kind of see how the spaces are being used, because I do think we do that often, and even in some of the RTI spaces and things that, again, have been operational like that for 25 years, they're not optimal learning spaces. And as, like Doug said, even the space matters. And as we look even at those spaces, just creating additional space, I think we could sit up here all night long and talk about, I think we were trying to do some of that high-level things you asked for music and some of those higher, like the library and things, but I really believe in every way as we discuss this, it improves our RTI suite, it improves our speech, it improves our OTRP, everything about it. I think that we can definitely walk through those, but it does, and there was something else I was going to say about the Hillside. I feel like I'm selling it, but I think the more we do speak about it and the more we go up there, I have a concern about the space and the immediate space issues and then the long-term and things that are important to the district, such as class size, special education programming, music and arts. I will say, just looking back, we had just done, if you just look about even, again, class size is very different now than it even was. My son, who actually graduated last year, when we were just looking back to see what the sections were, when he was in Hillside, there was, from K to 4, there were 25 sections of K to 4. Right now, there's 30 sections, because there was 5, again, and we had no communications classes. So as people years ago, you forget all the things that have evolved since that time. And to your point about not having dedicated instructional spaces, the plus teacher, when she lost her classroom this year, sent a very lengthy doc, right? She had expressed to us just when you don't have a dedicated space, all the program changes and that it orders on the program. And I think we are going to be having that same kind of conversation around amongst some of those other specials in the immediate that we need to address. So I think long term, we may have to deal with that in the short term, but long term, we want to have dedicated spaces for people. That's it.
So I know that we're kind of running late, and there's a lot, we still have the second page of our agenda.
Can we just put in Joe's slides of he had a couple pictures that may make you want to hear the middle school presentation next week, because he's taken some pictures of the middle school auditorium and the condition. I'll pull that up right
Yeah,
now.
and then we'll keep moving. That'd be great. Okay.
And we can definitely, maybe the facilities meeting, and we can put that in minutes address. We do have a plan for next year, so, for space. Okay. All right, Joe. Wait, oops, not this PC, sorry.
I think they're pictures you've probably seen already, but
Okay. This is yours, right, Joe?
no.
No, it's coming out. Oh, why is this not opening? Here we go. We were asked to put a couple pictures together. This is acting out now. Oops. Oh, it is on the full screen, sorry. There we go.
So these are some of the floors that are in the classrooms, the whole Farragut wing classrooms throughout this first floor here. This is a music suite also, yes. Floors are coming up. They've been laid floor on top of floor over the years, just need to be replaced and redone. Those are some of the flooring issues that are throughout the building. It's a building built in 1930, so. This is the auditorium upstairs. You can see the plasters coming off everywhere on the walls. That's all asbestos walls. Just a huge space that is just wasted. These are the cornice all along the building. If you go outside, you'll see this everywhere, just rotting out all along the edge of the building. This is some of the things that have to be done for sure. And again, the doors that Veronica had hit on. The main thing is the security and safety with these doors. You can see they're like 4x4 panes of glass. So, an easy target for sure. And the sidewalks breaking up everywhere along this building and hillside. Tripping hazards. We've been creative in some of the tripping hazards, painting them yellow and stuff, but they need to be addressed. So. Not to mention the windows in the main office of Hillside. The ladies are always complaining. We even put plastic up one time inside because they feel the drafts in the winter, nurse's office as well, up there at Hillside. So, a lot of things that need to be addressed. Old building, time to update, in my opinion. There's a lot of challenges.
Some semi-unrelated question, but that auditorium is locked during the day, yeah? Like,
that auditorium is used by John Riss. On the stage only. He doesn't use the actual auditorium, he uses the stage.
With children.
For his choir, yeah.
wow, okay.
You're talking about the outside doors?
That's stage.
I'm talking about the asbestos.
Yeah, the asbestos is not, as long as you don't mess with it, it's not going to be airborne. So no one goes into the actual auditorium area.
Okay, they just
Yeah.
occupy.
They utilize the stage only, and they go off right down the stairwell.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Joe.
Really?
Appreciate it.
All right.
That's helpful.
All right.
So I think what we'll do
Thank
for
you.
the bond, and thank you, Veronica, and I'm sorry, I just forget you. Megan. Thanks, Veronica and Megan. The board, I mean, let's keep, this process is not the prettiest, easiest process because there's so many angles to it, but, you know, let's keep on it. As, you know, Charlie said, it's never an easy process to go through a bond. You know, we'll come back on the 5th, and I think, is there a facilities meeting?
Well, I mean, I think at this point, you know, to Jody's point, what my experience has been, as I do think, you know, it does take a long time, and it is $25 million, so I don't expect the boards to say, sure, you know, give us the rubber stamp, and it is a process, but I do think at this point to either add some additional facilities meetings where we can kind of address or because I think we have spoken about addressing some of the current issues for next year, which is obviously part of the work we need to do, and then also kind of show how those other spaces roll out, because there is so much information and we can really speak to all those things. So I think we need to do that, and then think about having larger community forums, either use the PTSA meetings or places we're going to potentially.
So why don't we get we'll get a proposal for that down at the next facilities meeting, and then bring it back to the board, and we'll
And maybe if the facilities meeting,
for sure.
and maybe if the facilities meetings also work on the issue of sort of framing the discussion. So with
a lot of that's already down. I just don't think it's down quite on a piece of paper yet, but a lot of that's down.
Yeah. The community forums, how we frame that. Yeah.
We do a lot of outreach. I mean, we even want.
I'm gonna cut the conversation.
Sure.
Right?
Do it.
And is there public comment? Anyone?
Oh, I did move my chair over here, my seat, so I can get closer. I'm glad you noticed. All right. So, where's the clock? Because 3 minutes. How do we discuss this for 3 minness? There's so much to unpack. You won't have to, Jody. I'm going to cut myself short. I'm going to edit myself, but thanks. Rob McQueen, live in Hastings. Trying to figure out what I wanted to kind of touch on, because there is so much to unpack. I have to say, first of all, thank you for the open debate. Great minds don't always think alike. Keep talking to each other, keep debating it, keep getting our input. That's fantastic. It hurts now. It will pay off someplace down the road with all of us, because when you go to sell this in, you got to be together, and the story's got to be there, and it's not yet. So hopefully with all this debate, it's going to get you to that place where we can do the storytelling. I do appreciate that we stuck just to the bond today. Yes, we need classrooms for next year, but that's a different issue, and we're going to confuse the public if we try to merge those two conversations together. Now, maybe, and I'm a little confused by it, to be honest, but the boiler probably doesn't wait until 2020 or 2023 or 2024. So some of the bond seems to be for things that are going to be more immediate. And I think we need to delineate that and communicate that and let the public know, let all of us know, and I think you guys too, based on the nodding heads, what goes into the bond, how can we do that, how can we do some of the short-term space needs. But I do appreciate the focus on the bond, because I was confused 3 weeks ago, and now a lot clearer. Somebody said can't survive it, that we're non-compliant. As a special ed parent, you guys all know that's what I am, but I heard Title IX in addition to special ed, in addition to ADA, and in addition to other things, right? We are non-compliant in Hillside, probably Farragut, but we're touching on Hillside so much now. And I just hope that we'll do something I'm with Jeremy. I think you guys got a ton to do and a lot to focus on, and have been upfront about that with a lot of you. But wow, it sounds like you just become aware of the non-compliance issues too. We need to take care of that. But here's the big thing that I wanted to talk about. Jeremy talked about the super, the special ed, and the bond. We're not talking about the strategic plan. We're 2 years or whatever, 3 years, whatever it is, without a strategic plan now.
He just forgot to mention that.
Because it's kind of in between here somewhere, right?
That's not
we have the needs assessment, right, Charlie? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, I'm hoping to be there. I'm trying to switch my schedule. But we have the needs assessment that will lead to the strategic plan. It is a little bit of that chicken and egg that we're trying to talk about what our needs are without a needs assessment and without a strategic plan. I'm going to bring it back to special ed for 1 second. What is the vision of this district? I still don't know it. I hope you guys are getting there. We have a mission statement from the special ed department that does not use the word inclusivity or inclusion in it. We have a lot of conversation about classroom. Jody, you got me. We got a lot of, I told you there's so much to unpack. Yeah, exactly. We have a lot of conversations going around about special ed and music and arts and all the other things that make up for an educational community, but a lot of conversations about how now we need more things. I think, Dr. Wilson, you would say that a lot of reasons why districts build is because we need additional space for tech, special ed, music, arts, the other things. This is what we need. Population, yes, sorry. We're all watching it. We know our population of our young kids is going up. It might be by 2, by 7, by 5, whatever. But the needs of the population are greater. So the innovation, the things we're talking about in trends in education, that's really important for a forward-thinking community. But we don't have we don't know what the vision is. You don't build in a bond a classroom for communications or special ed unless you have no desire to be an inclusive district. Because that's not how inclusivity works. They're in the classroom together. They get modified education. They don't get pulled out into another classroom. So the conversation has to start. Doug, you said at the beginning of the night, what are we looking at? If you want to be an inclusive district, then you have to think about what that looks like in 5 years. So you build your facilities to be realistically serving that population. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob.
Hi, I don't have to say a lot of what I'll say, but I just want to concern. Jennifer Destin, 140 Fairmont Avenue. I kind of want to build on some of what Rob started to say. I so appreciate, I'm sure you know how much it warms my heart to hear special education mentioned this many times in any forum. But I don't think necessarily that the conversation about what is done as Hillside is separate or in any way battling against the conversation about special education. As a parent of a child with special needs, I looked at those spaces and I wrote, flexible seating, exclamation, exclamation point, places for collaboration. Collaborative projects are places where all children shine, right? Because they have the opportunity to work together. I also feel that we can't say enough about giving the teachers an opportunity to collaborate, and particularly collaborate in cross-functional ways. This notion of a resource center, for the lack of a better term, where all the children's related service providers would be housed in one place. If you look back at the audit, one of the key pain points in this district was about communication about children between their service providers and between their teachers. In the time that my child has moved through the school and that more intentional meetings have been set up to allow for that cross communication, I've seen the benefit that it has. So if the environment is going to allow for more of those conversations, it's going to have a huge benefit for all of our children. I will say that I don't hear from our community the same sense that special education is moving forward at such an independent, great clip as I heard discussed today, which may or may not be borne out by what happens with Dr. Katzman. So I would just encourage everyone as these discussions happen, the curriculum and learning discussions, the out-of-district busing discussions, that we always question, why are there so many children going out of district? When are they coming back? How can we better unsilo special education into the curriculum and learning instructions conversations? But I think Amy's plans for what that building looks like seems to go a long way, for me. That's it.
Hi, I'm Michelle Vivota, 70 Flower Avenue. I didn't have anything prepared except one thing, but now that I've heard all this discussion, which was really great discussion, and I really appreciate all the the openness and very positive discourse, even when there was disagreement. I think, like Lauren said before, I found the images that Amy showed to be really inspiring. Like, I was here maybe 2 meetings ago where I heard about the bond for the first time and started freaking out about taxes. and I was like, all right, they can remove the asbestos, but nothing else. And now after seeing these images and thinking about these possibilities, I really do feel inspired. And like Doug was saying, space does matter. And I work in higher ed. I work with college-age and graduate students, and if they are not on chairs with wheels, they will not move into groups to collaborate. And I will literally have to take their desks and move them together to get them into a group. It's just human behavior. Behavior is shaped by your environment. And so I think that, when I see those kinds of plans, and then I think about my kids they're different ages, but they're so different in their learning styles, and my son is coming into Hillside next year, and sometimes I think, how is he going to thrive in this environment, which my daughter does so well in, but they're such different types of learners, and I just think having that kind of flexibility will really better meet the needs of all learners, which goes, again, it all ties together. It goes along with what we're working on with special ed, which is not just special ed, it's all education, right? And meeting the educational needs of all of our students on a continuum. We keep talking about that, right? And so these plans would help, meet the needs of all kids. I don't know, I heard Doug refer to something that you got, Lauren, that you had talked about with curriculum and stuff I guess not in this forum, I don't know, but I would actually love to hear more about that, because I feel like some things that people said tonight did seem like the beginning of a vision that to me resembles what Hastings would the people of Hastings would want. So I would like to hear more about what you've been sharing with everyone, in a more public way, and see where that could go towards shaping our vision. I can tell you that as much as I'm grounded right now in Hillside for the next several years, when I saw the picture of the middle school auditorium, I was thinking that is no place that people who are moving to Hastings are thinking their kids are going to be performing in. So I guess there's, needs throughout the community, and I think that, getting the story together and getting the vision together will go a long way in convincing the community as well. So, and then the last thing that I really came here tonight to say was that I don't know if any of the parents who are trying to get increased recess time for their children are here, but I said I would come here and just keep that on the radar, that there are parents who are interested in increasing the recess time too. So don't forget about that one. Thank you.
Right, Michelle. And just to be clear, there aren't presentations in the middle school auditorium, right? I mean, there's not events going on there. Okay. Just wanted to make sure on the record we were clear. Well,
it's a space,
exactly.
but it's
we
not
could do
really
it, but
used.
just in case anyone was concerned about that, wanted to clear that up. Okay. Okay, we've got a lot to do here, so I'm going to just keep moving. It's late. I know some people may want to get up and go, so please.
Yeah, feel free.
Feel free. We're
Goodness,
done with the
everyone
bond
feel free.
conversation. And
Yeah. Doug is actually going to be voting for me. I'm ceding my voting power to you while I go home.
So I'm just going to keep moving here. If someone's got
Let's try to move quickly.
if someone's got something to do, so we're on to business items now. Items 1 through 14. Does anybody have any questions?
No.
Okay.
I do have one question.
Go for it.
There's no cost in this Georgia Tech.
No, we're just required to do
There's
it.
no cost in what?
Georgia Tech.
No,
Georgia Tech, like Yellow Jacket.
It's the renewal.
Logo use, Yellow
Yeah.
Jacket.
Our previous agreement with them.
That's like a different thing. We can talk about it another time, but it just seems like we could have our own logo. I mean, I know this has been a long
We don't,
conversation.
but there's a whole history to this.
I know.
Oh, we had a.
No, what I'm saying is that just for a district that prides itself on creativity and originality, to have gone and lifted someone else's logo, it's just somehow
It wasn't
off.
like we lifted their logo, but
Yeah, of course you did. How else would we have gotten?
So do we host it? Do we hold a competition to win the
Well, see,
logo?
that's the thing. There's
Draw a
kids,
new
there's a
Yellow
town,
Jacket?
there's
All right, so that's
for a
so-
later
no,
conversation.
later
it should
Let's
be
just
the
put that.
Hastings
We'll put a pin
Hornets,
in.
not the Hastings Yellow Jackets, but
Yeah, there we go. We can even change the name.
There you
Some
go.
people with old logo
Never
gear.
contest.
Okay, we'll put a pin in that one. We'll come back to it at some point.
Well, that's more like a mascot, the Yellow Jackets. You could actually design a logo for the school district.
Yeah, and we could. Yeah, right.
The
Yeah,
Yellow Jackets is a mascot.
right.
that's right.
Not
It's not a
the logo.
It's
logo.
dual. It has a dual purpose here. Yeah.
Yeah. So do we? All right, competition.
Okay. All right. So can I get a motion to pass under 6, 1 through 14 in a consent agenda?
So moved.
Do I get a second? Okay. All in favor? Okay. Placement for.
Personnel.
I'm looking at the paper one here. So
It is a
I'm-
business addendum.
No, I don't.
Is that, it's that piece of paper I handed out?
Is this?
Yeah, so
Okay.
the board has requested that 3D renderings be created for these spaces, or, I mean, what spaces you'd be interested in having them. Each time you get this type of work, it does take them over 40 hours to create each render. It's a very intensive kind of process, and this is the cost if the district, and I think actually at this point there is probably, maybe definitely with the hillside, because if you're going to go out to a larger community forum, and the middle school also, but I think there's something about hillside because it's a building addition that's a little bit more difficult to kind of envision.
Do we have to approve this tonight,
Well, if you
or
want them to start working.
to start working on it
Yeah.
right away? How long do these things take? Do we know?
About 40, it's about a week for each, depending, I mean, I don't know if they'll be doing them simultaneously, or they'll have one person working on it. So each rendering is about 40 hours.
$12,900 seems like a big price tag. I'm not saying it's a wrong price tag. I just haven't thought
I mean,
through
either,
it.
if you were interested, we could definitely, I mean, maybe the best way to go about it is having one of the areas done that you think would be the most, of the highest significance, maybe at Hillside, like the
interior.
rendering, maybe helpful to people.
Can we come back to this maybe November 5th?
Sure.
Yeah.
But
So
it'll
let's.
just wait, and then it won't be done.
Yeah, I think that's fine, because I think we primarily, if we want them, would want them for the public
Right.
meetings.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Because I do think the rendering that, and actually that rendering, I just want to give credit, of the middle school auditorium, again, it doesn't necessarily reflect where the middle school and high school currently are, but that rendering, that design was really Eva, who was the community member who created even just the way that the
Right.
space is laid out and the mezzanine, so.
Okay.
Anyway, but. I
let's
think
put this
they
on the
have-
agenda for
Yeah.
November 5th. Okay.
All right, so we're going to table
Oh.
that.
Wait, so those side views?
She actually also helped with the hillside, the idea of the outdoor, the window placement, all of that is kind of reflective of her vision for the design, because again.
Like 3D renderings would show an actual space with people in it
That's
being
not it. That's
used,
not- yeah.
which
This
we've
is
never
actually
seen.
like a really, like you ever see on TV when they're like, oh, this is what it looks like, and start dropping in the
Yeah.
Like, what is that show where they show you?
Okay, so let's keep moving on to 6B, placement for CSE and CPSC. Do I have a motion to approve these placements?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Okay. Personnel appointments. Does anybody have any questions? Can we do all of these together?
Yes,
A,
we
B,
can.
and C?
Yep.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve personnel A, B, and C?
Yeah, so moved.
And a second? Okay, all in favor? Okay. Minutes from the last meeting. Anybody have any questions?
All good.
Okay. So can I have a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting? That wasn't October 1, was it?
Yes.
October 1?
So moved.
Okay. All in favor?
Second.
Oh.
No, someone has a second.
There was a
I'll second.
Okay.
Jody's been setting it, seconding it.
I'll move it.
can't be
She's
first
like, let's
and
get
second.
it out of here.
It's 10:30.
All in favor? Jody's the one-woman motion maker. The Facilities Committee report, I think we can move past that. Finance, I don't know if there's anything you want to just hit on really quickly, Tim?
Honest to goodness, I think the process of writing these minutes is pretty effective.
Mm-hmm.
We spell out everything that took place in that
Right, and then if anybody
meeting
has a question,
in
they
those
can ask a
in
question.
those minutes. And
Yeah.
I think the
There's nothing immediate there.
no, nothing immediately actionable for the full board. The next big step will be, a report on reserves at the end of November.
Thanks for being so thorough.
Detailed, yeah.
These are mostly Lisa's minutes. I have to give credit. She'll see this video and she'll say, "You didn't credit me." She wrote most of this. I just did a section.
Well, then thank you to both.
Health and safety, we had a good meeting, talked a little about the clocks, talked about the potential for...
So glad you were there.
Yeah. It was actually a pretty good meeting. Yeah, you can read through the notes here. One thing that may come to the policy committee soon is...
I already sent it to you.
Yeah, I have
great.
received it.
You have it, okay. Which is a policy on housing Narcan here, in the unfortunate event that we would ever need it, just for safety reasons, not that we have needed it, which is essentially a counteracting drug for opiates and heroin.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of times it's just pills.
Pills, right. A lot
I
of
think
times.
people do associate it only with heroin, but,
Yeah.
but just like mentioned, and you'll see in the minutes that the majority of districts have adopted a policy and also keep it in hand, and there is no negative effects. And the nurse said if you administered Narcan and that wasn't what the individual needed, there's no harm. So I just think it's just something to have, because why wouldn't you have a policy on it, right? I mean, if God forbid
And Matt Moralia was there, who's the security consultant, and he went over a variety of different security protocols they're going to be trained on. You can read through. If you have any questions, you can get in touch with Maureen about some of those items. And then learning instruction. I don't know if Lauren or Charlie or Nanisha, you wanted to say anything about that meeting or not?
Well, I thought we had a good meeting. And we talked about different things that the committee, it was an organizational meeting, so we talked about what they'd like to talk about in coming meetings. And I think we identified a lot of points of interest going forward.
Let me just ask one question. So where do we stand on this committee? Are we going to maintain it in its current form, or are we going to move towards something that moves us to a committee of the board? How is this going to interplay with, yeah, that's it.
Well, I think it's at the pleasure of the board. And I think you guys need to decide. We, at one point, had thought we were going to have a committee of the whole, and then we said, no, we want to go to some sort of committee. And I would ask...
I guess my question is, how does it interplay with our hiring a director of curriculum, and how much of this...
Well, that's the topic we talked about, right? Because Charlie essentially said he'll step up and play that role of leading the committee now, where in some districts the head of curriculum does. I think the bigger issue, and the question was, we run out of time at board meetings, and we don't have time to dive deep into curriculum conversations, and so that committee was going to do some of that legwork, and then come back and present to the board. So, I think the question, I feel pretty strongly that it should be a district committee and not a Board of Ed committee, because if it's a Board of Ed committee and it becomes a public meeting, I feel we have the shadow curriculum meeting happening in the middle of the day when we all can't show up, with parts of the public showing up, which I just think is a challenge. And if we were going to go in that direction, I'd like to just have it all be a public meeting and all of us be here, because I think my personal opinion is if the curriculum committee is doing the work to frame things, then the public conversation is at the board meetings, because the rest of the board's not at those meetings either. So my strong opinion on the topic is that it is a district committee with the 3 members on it already and Charlie, and they do the framing and thinking work that gets brought to the public, of which the board is part.
Just to touch on what we did talk about, that just, I don't know if this would change your opinion at all. In terms of making decisions, that really wasn't even in what we were outlining as our goals. It was more of just informational for right now, talking about things like we don't have a curriculum posted so that people who are even inquiring about our district can see what children are learning K-12. And that was where the focus of our conversation was, just about concerns that we are having about curriculum, but even just the broader, we don't know what's going on K-12. And I don't think that would influence curriculum decisions. I think right now it's just a gathering work right now, or at least that's what I got. So maybe
No, I would agree with Nanisha in saying that we touched on some of these questions in our committee, but we felt that the goal of the work this year could be really a discovery and documenting of what practices are used, what curriculum packages are, for lack of a better word, are used K through 12, so that it could be publicly documented and shared with the board, because right now there is no way for a board member, let alone a public person, prospectively looking at our school district to know, for example, what math curriculum we're using in the elementary school. That we don't have a document that shows the public, let alone the board, what that is.
And I only think that would, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So it would be our goal just to be fact-finding and not to be assessing these pieces of curriculum at this point.
And I think it would only help us in, one, looking more attractive towards candidates who are looking for that role, because that person would be walking into, okay, I can do an assessment now based on this document that's here that's outlining what we're using K-12.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I guess my point wasn't necessarily about the content, which that all sounds great. I think it's great framing content, because then you're doing the hard work of that needs to be brought to the board. My concern was that it turned into this public meeting, that there was dialogue going on outside of the traditional board meeting, of which the rest of the board then wasn't hearing dialogue that can't get recreated for the board. Now, if you're only...
Yeah. It was posted as a, I think that was what the confusion was.
I understand that it was posted. What I'm saying is, it was always set up as a district committee. Over the last couple of years, it was mistakenly posted as a Board of Ed committee, and I think the intention was it was always set up as a district committee, so we didn't create a dynamic where there was curriculum dialogue going on in the middle of the day somewhere that then the rest of the board couldn't get up to speed on when we got to a board meeting. So that's really the intention. We've had long conversations about this over the past couple of years. It's become a hot topic for many years. I really don't want to relitigate it right now, quite frankly. If the board feels as though it's important to have a public committee during the day for curriculum, I think we need to all have a conversation about that together. If for some reason there's a strong feeling, like I said, I mean, Jody, you've been a part of those conversations. This is going back to 2016. This was a hot topic. No, it's going to be 3 of us. No, I want to be on it. No, I want to be on it. Let's make it the whole board. We kept coming there. So we said, we're going to go back here. And now we're back here again, and I feel like the whole thing's coming up again. So,
logistically, if it's a district committee, how does it play out logistically?
So if something's a Board of Education committee, it's open to the public by law, and anyone can show up.
Right.
If it's a district committee, it's the work of the district, of which board members can be members, but that's really a committee that is, and I've gone through this many times with our attorneys, because this topic comes up a lot, and if it's a district committee, it is a private committee run by district administrations, of which board members can come, and there may be other district officials or district administrators there. As soon as it becomes a public, there's only 4 committees that are required by law: audit, finance, facilities, and policy. It is the choice of the board if they want to make other ones. That has come up several times, and we've always said it's a district committee, not to be a public.
I think without, gosh, my own personal opinion on this is, without gosh, this is a thorny issue. It's a thorny issue. Charlie, a lot falls in your lap if it winds up as a board committee, and sort of, because what I envision, right, is as this committee is doing its work and pulling in building leaders, right, to have these sort of broad-ranging discussions on curriculum, if the meetings go off the rails, then we're going in and sort of backfilling hurt feelings and otherwise. And I think it's going to be maybe somewhat better kind of managed in the district format.
I have no problem with that. In fact, the term board committee was a typo.
Yeah.
And if you look at the research that was done by Janine, in all the discussions we had at the retreat, it was described as a district committee.
Yeah.
So, you know, what's wrong with just changing the nomenclature back to what it was originally intended to be?
Yeah. And I guess the thing is, what I'm wondering, so this is an open question really for the committee members. Given what you just laid out as the objectives for the committee for the year, essentially as building up some factual data and some background information on where are we from a curricular standpoint across this, is there an advantage or disadvantage to one versus the other? It strikes me as probably not, but that doesn't, because it strikes me that way doesn't mean that's right.
Well, I feel like I'd feel more comfortable with it being, I think it really only needs to be a district committee with the goals that we have set forth this year, because we really are only fact-finding. We're basically going to be, I mean, in my mind, filling out a spreadsheet, and getting the information and really not using that time with building leaders when they come in and explain or list out what the different curricular pieces are at each grade level or in each specialty. It's not an opportunity for the committee members to be qualifying what they're doing or assessing what they're doing or having real dialogue even really about what they're doing, but just having data.
Right.
And because of that, I don't think, if the conversation starts becoming qualifying, I don't feel comfortable it not being the whole board. So if it's just fact-finding, I really feel like it should be a district committee.
Are you okay with that?
I'm totally okay with that. The one thing that I will mention, now that we have how are we going to, what is the expectation from the community now, because they have attended a meeting. So that's the only thing that I want to talk about, how we're going to handle that moving forward. I'm fine with it being a district committee.
I
think this is a moot point, quite frankly. I don't know why this has become a big issue.
No, it's not. I think with respect to the public, it's mea culpa. The appropriate way to run this committee, given the objectives we have for this committee at this point in time, is for it to be district. That was the original intent. We made a mistake. We move forward. We all make mistakes. I do it at least 10 times a day. Fine.
Okay, great.
What were you going to say, Charlie?
Well, I actually think, and this goes back maybe a little bit to Jeremy's point, where you were saying there's so much to do, we can't do everything. And the fact is, would be my preference. Look, tonight we had this terrific presentation from the high school. I think we'd all agree. And to the extent, if we only have time to talk about, bond issue, I realize, it's apparent that I don't want to see the board falling out of touch with what's happening in the buildings, the education.
Exactly.
It's so important. But if we just don't have time to do it, this would be second best. If you can't do it as a whole, we can't have as many of those presentations as we could easily schedule because there's so much going on. Well, at least if you have this committee, keeping track of it and reporting back to the larger board, I think that's something. However, I must also tell you, I was interviewing a group of teacher leaders today, and they feel very much left out. They very much want to be part of any kind of committee on curriculum, which historically they were. And the history of that committee that we've been talking about, was actually, there was a large participation of people representing the community and the teachers and only to a minor extent, a board member or two. But that was really a very functional model for many years. That fell by the wayside. Actually, this committee hasn't been meeting for a couple of years, from what I'm told, at all. So it's important to do something, it seems to me.
Can it be a district committee and yet be large? like what you just described?
Just again, I'm not sure how ambitious we can be because of the
Because of all the work.
workload of how many other things can we do. You know, this is not, to me, this is something to sort of just to at least keep our focus on, to some degree at least, on curriculum issues. But clearly, it's a bridge to what should be a better setup in years to come, starting next year.
So I just want to ask the question that, you know, I have been asked that we have all these meetings on our website. So do you want me to then list them as non-public meetings?
Well, do you list all district meetings on the website?
I do have them all.
But I'm saying,
So if you don't put them on the website calendar, take them off the calendar?
But that's a board committee.
Aren't those board committees?
No, their district committees are on there. That we
Under technology committee?
If they have a meeting date, yes, I put it on the calendar. I've been told, it's been our practice to put all meetings on the district calendar so the public knows what meetings are happening. And we have them under the board committee meeting dates. So then, do you want me to specify
But are
that
those all
district
open
committees?
meetings?
Do you want me to specify that district committees are not open to the public? And that's what I'm going to be challenged with.
But what other committees are you talking about? Because I mean, if you're talking about diesel and things,
Let's take this off. We'll take this offline and we'll talk about it. This has been a big issue that's been going on for a number of years. I don't think there's actually any hard and fast rules that community members can show up to different district meetings. It's become an issue with curriculum historically. It has been a big issue. And the issue has been that there become these side curriculum conversations of smaller groups of people where lots happens, clear notes aren't taken, and then we come back to the larger board, and the board members feel as though someone else has gone way down a path that they didn't get to go down, and it just became really unwieldy. So,
Okay, but we're at a good place now, and I think this idea of what
Yeah,
the
but as
plan
far
is
as listing
and
it
the fact
publicly,
finding,
yeah.
basically, to see where we are,
Yeah.
is a good thing to be doing right
I
now.
think if we're just, more than anything else, just really clear on that objective and able to communicate that objective, because it's just something where people get rightfully a little reserved, I think, on the teacher administration side when you say curriculum. It's certainly, it's
If we want to come back and we want to create that proposal for what it used to look like with 15 people, I mean that's okay, but I don't want to stumble into that, which is what I feel like we've done here.
Well, exactly, we're not going to do that this year.
Right.
Right.
But down the road, you might want to do some of that.
Right.
However, we
have to get a
also want to talk
curriculum
about this
person.
at the retreat.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's we can, because this is always the
Figure it
most charged. I mean, what is the business of a school district? Curriculum. It's always the most charged committee. People really don't fight over themselves to get on the policy committee. No offense to the policy committee members, but
Did you figure out a date for that?
yeah, November 14th is the date of I think it's the date you can't be there. It was the only date that we could.
The retreat is
We could make
November
it work.
14th?
I'm going to keep moving here. There's an advocacy update. We'll talk about this at the retreat. Sounds like there's still, some energy
But
around.
Jeremy, did you say you can't be at the retreat?
Yeah, I'm going to be in San Francisco.
There was no date between now and December 31st that we could get everyone together, so.
October 32nd?
Right, October 32nd. Be there, be square. Advocacy update, I'm not going to go through it now, but you can go on our website, and that's under where? It's under Board Advocacy. Board Advocacy, which is an update on SALT. It's a very long letter. Everyone in Westchester weighed in on, essentially the net of it all is big law firm Baker & McKenzie has essentially said the way that the IRS has deemed donations not, what's the word I'm looking for?
Have to be charitable.
Not charitable, is actually against the law, and there needs to be a comment period, and so it's something we've signed our name to. So you can go read a little bit more about that. Second public comment.
You deserve it.
I've been absent the past 3 months.
I don't know why I put my phone. As Jennifer Destin, 140 Fairmont Avenue, as the bond proposal stuff was being flipped through, I was reading through the committee notes, and I just wanted to touch on 3 quick things. They're super quick. The first thing is about the basketball courts at Hillside. I do hope that there's, for the skateboarding thing, those basketball courts are used daily for, you guys know that? Okay, done. On to the next. Okay.
No chance.
Okay, good. The second thing I wanted to talk about was, I have to admit that when I read about the curriculum instruction committee and saw I was thrilled with the topics, but then saw, okay, they're going to be talking to building leadership. Is there going to be some special education representation? Didn't really see where that was. It started to get a little tense because, as we know historically, an issue is that curriculum decisions have been made in this community without that lens, and then we're backtracking and retrofitting how to make a curriculum work for children with special needs. I would just say that if the purpose of the committee is to assess what's there, is not to assess, but merely to catalog what is there now, that really needs to be communicated very clearly, because I think that in the absence of that, people are going to get tense and wonder what kind of discussions are happening. So that's just that. And the last thing is, and I kind of touched on it before, but I just want to say it again. This thing about out-of-district funding, busing, and better understanding what the costs are, which I think is fantastic, and what it really means for this district, which I think is fantastic. I would just strongly urge you not to just look at that from a busing point of view. We have been asking for years to get a better understanding of why children go out of district, and we're continually met with resistance on diving deep on that issue. I think there's probably a lot to uncover and a lot of potential cost savings there. So if you're going to talk about the busing, I suggest you use it as an opportunity to talk about the larger issue as well. That's it.
I say I agree with you completely, and the only reason I just want you to know that I mentioned the financial part is that, of course, we're talking about finances with respect to any kind of bond work. And here's to the contrary of what people might suppose. You can build classrooms in an efficient way that is cost neutral, or frankly brings in revenue. At the same time, you're really serving your main purpose of bringing kids back to the district.
And I will add, because I've heard parts of these discussions before. I wasn't able to attend that board meeting, but I would have said it. I think that as we discuss out of district, and hopefully that will be a larger discussion, the notion of what it means to parentally choose to take your child out of district. My child's in district, but I work with a lot of families who make that choice. It's an agonizing decision. People move to Hastings because they love Hastings. They love everything about it, the schools, the community. And to say that my child can't learn here as I want them to and move them somewhere else, it's not as simple as a choice. So that's all just to chew on and think on.
The only thing I just wanted to mention is that the out-of-district funding was for it was for like kids who are not attending schools that are parentally placed.
I'm just saying, if we're going to start talking about it, let's just crack it wide open and really talk about it. That was my point.
Yeah, but we were referring to
like private schools, it's not an IEP.
And I think it's important, very important, to note that we have in fact been bringing back a lot of kids. And we'll continue to do so.
Good.
Board of Ed comments. Anyone?
I was thinking.
It's better be really profound.
Just joking.
Great. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.